I always wondered why my best friend Meredith insisted on hosting my birthday dinner at her place instead of the restaurant we'd planned. Now, watching my husband Colby wheel his suitcase down our driveway and into her waiting car on the evening of my 35th birthday, everything made perfect sense. 15 years of friendship and 8 years of marriage collapsed into a single, devastating moment of clarity. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The crystal wind chimes my mother had given us as a wedding present tinkled softly, in the spring breeze as I stood frozen in our doorway. Just an hour earlier, I'd been putting the finishing touches on my makeup, excited for what I thought would be a surprise birthday dinner Colby had planned. Instead, I got a different kind of surprise, one that shattered the foundation of my entire life. "I can't do this anymore, Camille," Colby had said, his voice eerily calm as he placed his wedding ring on our bedroom dresser. "Meredith and it wasn't supposed to happen, but we can't fight it anymore. She understands me in ways you never have." The bedroom around me seemed to warp and distort as I struggled to process his words. Our wedding photo on the nightstand, Colby dipping me backward for a kiss, both of us laughing, now looked like a prop from someone else's life. The walk-in closet door stood open, his side half empty, hangers abandoned like strange metal sculptures. "How long?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "Does it matter?" he replied, not meeting my eyes as he zipped his suitcase closed. But it did matter, especially when I remembered the late-night texts Meredith and I had exchanged just last week about my birthday plans. How she had insisted on changing the reservation from La Maison, my favorite French bistro, to her house for a more intimate celebration. How she'd asked detailed questions about Colby's schedule, claiming she wanted to coordinate the surprise. My mind raced backward through months of peculiar moments. Meredith's newfound interest in Colby's architectural projects, Colby's sudden enthusiasm for the charity foundation where Meredith volunteered, the way they both seemed to arrive separately but simultaneously to our group gatherings, the inside jokes I wasn't part of, the conversations that stopped when I entered a room. "She's waiting outside, isn't she?" I asked, a strange calm settling over me as the pieces locked into place. His hesitation told me everything before he nodded. Through the bedroom window, I could see her silver BMW idling at the curb, just out of view from our front door, close enough for a quick escape, far enough to maintain plausible deniability if any neighbors happened to be watching. Always calculating, always careful, that was Meredith. I followed him downstairs, watching as he gathered the last of his things, his favorite coffee mug, the leather-bound notebook I'd given him for Christmas, the vintage map of Paris we'd bought on our honeymoon. Each item he took was another small wound, each step toward the door, another fracture in the life we'd built. "You're really doing this today?" "On my birthday?" I asked, a spark of anger finally breaking through the numbness. He had the decency to look ashamed, if only for a moment. It wasn't planned this way, but Meredith thought, "Of course she did." I cut him off, my voice steady despite the hurricane raging inside me. "Because nothing says happy birthday like your husband leaving you for your best friend." The sunlight through our front door cast long shadows across the hardwood floors as he stood at the threshold, his tall frame silhouetted against the warm spring evening. Our neighbors across the street were watering their garden, oblivious to the collapse of my world. The Johnsons' kids rode bikes in circles on the sidewalk. Life continued its normal rhythm everywhere except in our home. "I'm sorry it ended this way," Colby said, his voice softer now. "You deserve better." "Yes," I replied simply. "I do." And then he was gone, walking down our brick pathway with his suitcase rolling behind him, heading toward Meredith's car. I watched as she stepped out briefly, her red dress catching the evening light, her blonde hair perfectly styled even for this moment of betrayal. They embraced, not even attempting to hide it now. Then they were both in her car, driving away from the wreckage they'd created. I closed the door slowly, turning to face our half-empty home. The silence was deafening. On the console table in the entryway, Colby had left his house key next to the birthday card he must have purchased before deciding to leave, still in its envelope, never signed. Next to it was his phone charger, forgotten in his haste. Small mercies, I thought bitterly. At least I wouldn't have to see them together at the dinner Meredith had planned. The dinner that now made sense, her elaborate scheme to announce their relationship to our friend group, using my birthday as their stage. I picked up my phone, seeing the notifications piling up. Messages from friends asking where I was, why I was late to my own birthday dinner. Photos from Meredith's house showing decorations and a cake with my name on it. Our mutual friends gathered, waiting for the guest of honor who would never arrive, and probably the dramatic announcement that would follow. I silenced my phone and walked to the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed softly as I opened it, staring blankly at the bottle of champagne Colby and I had been saving for tonight. Next to it was the chocolate mousse I'd made yesterday, his favorite dessert, my peace offering after a week of tension I had misinterpreted as work stress. With deliberate calm, I took the champagne and a single glass to our back patio. The garden lights came on automatically as dusk deepened, illuminating the flower beds we'd planted together last spring. I filled my glass and raised it in a silent toast to the empty chair across from me. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered as I sipped the champagne, too expensive to waste, too painful to share. My initial shock began to crystallize into something harder, something colder. In the quiet of my backyard, with crickets beginning their evening chorus, I made myself a promise. This wouldn't be the end of my story. It would be the beginning of something else entirely. My phone continued to vibrate inside. Undoubtedly, the drama was unfolding at Meredith's house. Perhaps Colby and Meredith were making their grand announcement to our friends even now. I imagined their practiced expressions of regret mixed with newfound joy, the careful narrative they'd constructed to cast themselves as star-crossed lovers rather than betrayers. I thought of our friends' reactions, the uncomfortable silence, the awkward glances, perhaps a few half-hearted attempts at congratulations. Christine would be furious on my behalf. She'd never particularly liked Meredith's performative perfectionism. Stephen and Emily would be caught in the middle, too kind, to express disapproval but too loyal to embrace the betrayal. Manuel would probably leave immediately, uncomfortable with emotional scenes of any kind. And Sienna, Meredith's younger sister and my friend by extension, would be in an impossible position, torn between family loyalty and basic decency. I wondered if anyone would leave the dinner in protest, or if social awkwardness would keep them all trapped in Meredith's immaculate dining room, eating the gourmet meal she'd undoubtedly prepared while my marriage was served up as the evening's main entertainment. As darkness settled completely over the garden, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of the betrayal. Not just Colby's, but Meredith's. My best friend since college, the maid of honor at my wedding, the person who had held my hand through my father's funeral and celebrated every professional achievement. The woman who knew all my insecurities, my hopes, my fears. She hadn't just taken my husband. She'd weaponized our friendship. I recalled all the confidences I'd shared with her over the years. Every argument with Colby, every moment of doubt or frustration in my marriage. All ammunition she could use to position herself as the solution to his discontent. All the times I'd unintentionally given her the blueprint to dismantle my relationship, piece by piece. The champagne bottle was half empty now, but I remained surprisingly clear-headed. This wasn't the kind of pain that could be dulled by alcohol. This was the kind that required complete awareness to process, to remember, to use. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My phone had finally stopped vibrating. Either they'd made their announcement and the drama had subsided, or someone had finally noticed my absence and realized the cruelty of what was happening. Either way, the silence felt like another small betrayal. The ease with which my birthday celebration had apparently continued without me. I carried my glass inside and moved through the quiet house, turning on lights as I went. In my bedroom, I stared at the empty spaces Colby had left behind, his closet half bare, his nightstand cleared except for the lamp. In the bathroom, his toothbrush gone, his expensive shaving kit missing from the drawer. It was methodical, this leaving. Not impulsive at all. He'd been planning it, preparing for it, perhaps for weeks or months. And Meredith had helped him time it perfectly. On my birthday, when the emotional impact would be most devastating, when they could control the narrative, by having all our friends gathered to witness their new beginning. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my hand over his side of the mattress. 8 years of marriage, reduced to empty drawers and bare hangers. 8 years of building a life, together ended with a carefully orchestrated exit. But as I sat there in the half-empty bedroom, something unexpected began to stir beneath my grief and shock. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that, but something more focused, more purposeful. I thought of Meredith's calculated precision, of Colby's practiced speech, of their carefully timed departure. They thought they had scripted the perfect exit, designed for maximum drama and minimum consequences. They believed they had seized control of the narrative, leaving me as merely a supporting character in their love story, the discarded wife, the betrayed friend, a footnote in their journey toward happiness. They were wrong. I walked to my closet and pulled out a sleek leather notebook, a gift from a client I'd never used. Its blank pages seemed to offer a new beginning as I opened it on the desk by the window. Outside, the neighborhood had gone quiet, most houses dark except for the soft glow of television screens. Inside, I picked up a pen and began to write. At the top of the first page, I wrote 3 words: the next chapter. Because while Colby and Meredith might think they'd ended my story today, they'd actually just given me the opening line of a new one. And in this story, I would be the author, not a side character. In this story, the betrayed wife wouldn't cry herself to sleep or beg for explanations or fade quietly into the background. In this story, Camille Thompson would rise from the ashes of her birthday betrayal and show them both exactly what they'd underestimated. The morning after my birthday betrayal dawned with offensive cheerfulness. Sunlight streamed through the bedroom windows I'd forgotten to close. Birds chirped in the oak tree outside. And for one blissful moment before full consciousness hit, everything was normal. Then reality crashed back. I rolled over to face Colby's empty side of the bed, the indentation in his pillow already fading. My phone showed 47 missed calls and messages, most from last night, a few from this morning. I scrolled through them numbly, concerned texts from Christine and Emily, an awkwardly formal voicemail from Stephen, and a single message from Sienna that simply read, "I had no idea. I'm so sorry." Nothing from Colby. Nothing from Meredith. Our story hadn't begun with betrayal. That's what made their actions so devastating. They had destroyed something that had once been beautiful, genuine, whole. Colby and I had met 9 years ago at a charity fundraiser for the city's Historical Preservation Society. I was there representing my interior design firm, which specialized in restoring historical properties while maintaining their original character. He was the promising young architect whose modern designs somehow managed to complement rather than clash with classical structures. "You're the one who saved the Miller Mansion," he'd said when we were introduced, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. "I drove by it yesterday. That balustrade restoration is incredible." It wasn't the typical opening line I received at these events. where men usually commented on my dress or asked if I was enjoying the champagne. Colby had seen my work and recognized the passion behind it. By the end of the evening, we'd sketched potential renovations for an old theater on cocktail napkins and arranged to meet for coffee the following week. Our relationship evolved naturally, from professional admiration to friendship to romance. He proposed a year later on the rooftop garden of that same renovated theater, which had become our first joint project. "I want to build a life with you," he'd said, "one that combines the best of the past with possibilities for the future." And we had built that life, blending his architectural vision with my eye for historical detail. We bought a 1920s Craftsman bungalow in the Oak Hill neighborhood and spent 2 years restoring it to its original glory while carefully modernizing the infrastructure. The house became both our sanctuary and our showpiece. Clients and friends marveled at how we'd preserved its soul while making it functional for contemporary living. Meredith had been there through it all. She and I had met in college, bonding over late-night study sessions for our shared art history course. While I channeled my creative energy into interior design, she pursued museum curation before transitioning to nonprofit arts administration. She'd been a constant in my life through career changes, relationships, family celebrations, and tragedies. When I introduced her to Colby during our early dating phase, she'd pulled me aside at the end of the evening. "He's different from the others," she'd said with apparent sincerity. "He looks at you like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life." She was my maid of honor at our wedding, delivering a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Some people search forever for their perfect complement," she'd said, raising her glass. "Camille and Colby found that rare harmony where two distinct visions create something more beautiful together than either could alone." The irony of those words now felt like acid in my throat. Our marriage hadn't been perfect. No relationship is, but it had been solid. Or so I thought. We weathered the normal stresses, demanding clients, financial decisions, whether to start a family. We'd been trying for a baby for the past year without success, a private struggle that had admittedly created some tension. I'd confided my fears to Meredith over countless coffee dates. Was it my fault? Was Colby growing resentful? Was something wrong with me? She'd been so supportive, so understanding. "These challenges can either break a marriage or make it stronger," she'd advised. "Give Colby space when he needs it. Men process disappointment differently." Had she been creating that space deliberately, widening it until she could step into the gap? I forced myself out of bed and into the shower, letting hot water cascade over me as I tried to wash away the hollow feeling in my chest. In the bathroom, mirror. I hardly recognized myself. Eyes puffy from sporadic crying, complexion pale, hair tangled. This woman looked like a victim. I refused to be one. After dressing in jeans and a simple blouse, I made coffee and carried it to the home office. Colby and I had shared. My half was meticulously organized with fabric samples, color palettes, and client folders. His half now sat partially empty, his laptop gone, some reference books missing. But his drafting table remained, too large to take in a hasty exit. His architectural awards still lined the shelf above it. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, ignoring the social media notifications that had accumulated overnight. Instead, I opened our joint accounts: banking, credit cards, investment portfolio, cloud storage for home documents. Colby and I had always been transparent with our finances, maintaining both joint and individual accounts. My business operated separately from our personal finances, but we'd combined resources for major investments and household expenses. We'd built a comfortable life, with my design business thriving and Colby's architectural practice gaining prestige. I methodically documented everything, taking screenshots of account balances, recent transactions, and asset allocations. Not out of vindictiveness, but out of self-preservation. Knowledge was power, and I needed every advantage. A text notification interrupted my inventory. Christine, asking if she could stop by. I hesitated before responding. Christine had been my friend since I moved to this city 10 years ago. As a divorce attorney, she had seen the ugliest sides of relationship breakdowns, which made her both compassionate and pragmatic. If anyone would offer clear-eyed advice without unnecessary platitudes, it would be her. I texted back a simple yes and continued my documentation. When the doorbell rang an hour later, I had compiled a comprehensive overview of our financial situation, changed all my personal passwords, and started a list of things I needed to address immediately. I felt strangely calm, almost detached as I opened the door. Christine stood on the porch holding a bakery box and a bottle of wine. Her usual polished appearance was slightly disheveled, her dark curls pulled back haphazardly, suggesting she'd come straight from her morning run. "I would have come last night, but I didn't know until this morning," she said, stepping inside and placing her offerings on the entry table. "Sienna called me. She left Meredith's dinner as soon as they made their announcement." So they had gone through with their planned revelation, even in my absence. The thought of our friends sitting through that spectacle made my stomach turn. "What did they say?" I asked, leading Christine to the kitchen where I poured us both coffee. The wine would wait. I needed clarity now, not comfort. "According to Sienna, they gave some rehearsed speech about not meaning to hurt you, but finding a connection they couldn't ignore." Christine's voice dripped with contempt. "Meredith had the audacity to say she hoped everyone would support both of you through this difficult transition." "How considerate of her," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "And how did everyone react?" Apparently it was awkward as hell. Manuel left immediately. Emily was in tears. Stephen just sat there looking stunned, Christine reported, stirring cream into her coffee. But Sienna said the worst part was that when someone asked where you were, Meredith just said you needed space, and then served the birthday cake she'd ordered for you, with your name on it. The calculated cruelty of that detail should have devastated me. Instead, it hardened something inside me, crystallizing my shock into resolve. "Have you heard from either of them today?" Christine asked carefully. "No," I replied, "but it's only a matter of time before they start crafting the narrative they want everyone to believe. Colby will probably portray himself as the tortured soul who never meant to cause pain. Meredith will position herself as the reluctant other woman who couldn't help falling in love." Christine studied me over the rim of her coffee mug. "You're being remarkably clear-headed about this. What's the alternative? Fall apart? Give them the broken ex-wife story they're probably expecting?" I shook my head. "I need to be strategic now, not emotional." "That's why I came over," Christine said, reaching into her bag to pull out a legal pad. "To help you navigate this from a position of strength. We need to protect you legally, financially, and personally." As Christine outlined the immediate steps I should take, consulting a divorce attorney, not her, as she was too close to the situation, documenting assets, securing personal documents, I felt a strange sense of clarity emerging from the chaos of the past 24 hours. "There's something else you should know," Christine said hesitantly. "Colby's firm is being considered for the Westlake renovation project, that historic hotel downtown. The announcement is expected next week. It would be the biggest project of his career." The Westlake. A landmark building I'd helped assess for historical significance last year. The Preservation Committee had specifically noted my recommendations in their planning documents. If Colby secured that contract, it would elevate his practice to a new level of prominence. "How do you know this?" I asked. "My firm represents the investment group backing the renovation," Christine explained. "It's not public knowledge yet, but the decision has essentially been made. They're just finalizing contract details." I absorbed this information silently, adding it to my mental inventory of the situation. Not for revenge, I wasn't there yet, but for understanding the complete picture of what I was facing. As Christine and I continued talking, sketching out a plan for the coming days and weeks, I realized that while Colby and Meredith had been plotting their new beginning, they had failed to consider one critical factor. They had left me with nothing to lose and everything to prove, and that made me dangerous in ways they couldn't yet imagine. After Christine left, promising to check in later, I found myself drawn back to the moment everything changed. The human mind is strange that way. We replay trauma, dissecting it frame by frame, searching for signs we might have missed, warnings we should have heeded. My birthday had started normally enough. I'd woken to Colby's side of the bed already empty, but that wasn't unusual. He often rose early to work when facing project deadlines. I'd found a coffee mug in the sink and a note on the counter. Early meeting. See you tonight. Happy birthday. Nothing in his handwriting had suggested turmoil or deceit. I'd spent the morning at my design studio downtown, finalizing concepts for a Victorian renovation in the historic district. My assistant, Zoe, had brought cupcakes and a small wrapped gift, a vintage book on traditional textile patterns she'd found at an estate sale. The day had progressed with the pleasant anticipation of my birthday dinner that evening. Around noon, Meredith had called. Her voice had carried that particular brightness she always adopted when hiding something. Change of plans for tonight, she'd announced without preamble. The restaurant had a pipe burst in the kitchen. Complete disaster. But don't worry, I'm hosting at my place instead. Same time, same people, better wine since we don't have to pay restaurant markups. That's strange, I'd replied. La Maison didn't mention any problems when I passed by this morning. The French bistro was just down the block from my studio, and I'd waved to Antoine, the owner, on my way to work. There had been the slightest pause before Meredith laughed. Well, it just happened. Antoine called me directly since I made the reservation. You know how he dotes on me since I helped with that grant for his cooking program. It had seemed plausible enough. Meredith did have connections throughout the city thanks to her position with the Arts Foundation. Still, something in her tone had struck me as off. I should call him to reschedule for another night, I'd suggested. Already. Taken care of, Meredith had rushed to say. Just come to my place at 7. And wear that black dress from the charity gala last fall, the one with the open back. It looked stunning on you. Looking back, I realized she'd been ensuring I wouldn't contact the restaurant and discover her lie. And the dress suggestion? Perhaps she wanted me in black, subconsciously casting me as already in mourning for my marriage. The afternoon had progressed without incident. I'd left the studio early to get ready, expecting Colby to meet me at home before we went to Meredith's together. But when I arrived, something felt immediately wrong. The house had that peculiar emptiness that goes beyond mere absence, a hollowness, that signals fundamental change. I called out for Colby as I moved through the downstairs rooms, my voice echoing against the hardwood floors and craftsman woodwork we'd so lovingly restored. When I reached our bedroom doorway, I froze. Colby stood beside our bed, methodically placing folded shirts into an open suitcase. He'd changed from his work clothes into jeans and a casual button-down, Meredith's favorite shade of blue on him. I realized now, his movements were precise, practiced, as if he'd rehearsed this moment. What are you doing? My voice had sounded strange even to my own ears. Too high, too tight. He'd flinched slightly, but didn't stop packing. I was hoping to be gone before you got home. The casual cruelty of that statement had stolen my breath. He'd wanted to disappear without even facing me, leaving me to arrive at Meredith's dinner alone and unsuspecting. Gone where? I'd asked, though some part of me already knew. The pieces were arranging themselves in my mind even as I struggled to deny the picture they formed. He'd finally turned to face me then, his expression a carefully constructed mask of regret without actual remorse. Camille, we need to talk. Such an ordinary phrase for such an extraordinary betrayal. About what? About why you're packing a suitcase on my birthday? About why Meredith suddenly changed our dinner plans? Each question had raised my voice a pitch higher. about why my husband is leaving without even having the courage to tell me to my face. His composure had slipped then, a flash of guilt crossing his features before he recovered. This isn't how I wanted to do this. Well, I'm sorry if my unexpected arrival home has inconvenienced your desertion schedule. I'd snapped, anger momentarily, overpowering shock. Please don't let me interrupt, just tell me why. He'd sat heavily on the edge of the bed, next to his half-packed suitcase. It just happened. We didn't plan it. What just happened, Colby? Be specific. I'd remained standing in the doorway, unwilling to enter a space that suddenly felt like hostile territory. Meredith and I... He'd looked down at his hands, at the wedding ring he was already twisting off his finger. We've developed feelings for each other, strong feelings. We've tried to ignore it, to fight it. But how long? I'd interrupted, my voice deadly quiet. He'd hesitated, and in that pause, I'd read the truth. This was no recent development, no sudden passion. This had been building while I remained oblivious, trusting both my husband and my best friend implicitly. 6 months, he'd finally admitted. It started during the Miller Foundation project. The Miller Foundation, Meredith's workplace, where Colby's firm had been redesigning their headquarters. 6 months of deception. 6 months of Meredith listening sympathetically to my marriage concerns while sleeping with my husband. 6 months of Colby coming home to me, sharing my bed, making plans for our future, all while building a secret life with my best friend. And tonight? The dinner at her place? I'd asked, already knowing the answer. We thought it would be better to tell everyone at once, he'd replied, as if this somehow justified their orchestrated humiliation. To explain the situation to our friends so they wouldn't feel caught in the middle. How considerate, I'd said, my voice dripping with sarcasm that barely masked my pain. Using my birthday dinner as your coming-out party. I'm sure everyone will appreciate your efficiency. He'd stood then, resuming his packing with renewed urgency. Meredith thought it would be easier this way. One conversation instead of dozens. She's waiting for me. Of course she is, I'd replied, a strange calm settling over me as the full scale of their betrayal became clear. Heaven forbid you keep her waiting. After all, what's 6 months compared to 8 years of marriage and 15 years of friendship? He'd zipped his suitcase closed, removing the last cufflinks from his dresser and pocketing his passport. I'd watched with a detachment that felt like floating outside my body. This calculated departure, the carefully selected items, the planned announcement, the strategic timing, revealed a cold-bloodedness I'd never seen in either of them before. When he'd finally brushed past me in the doorway, suitcase in hand, I'd asked one final question. Does what we built together mean nothing to you? He'd paused on the stairs, looking back with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It meant everything. Once. But people change, Camille. Needs change. No, I'd replied softly. People don't change this much. They just reveal who they truly are. I'd followed him downstairs, watching as he gathered the last few items, his keys, though he removed our house key from the ring, his favorite leather portfolio, the vintage watch his grandfather had left him. Each object carefully chosen, each movement deliberate. And then he was gone, walking down our front path toward Meredith's waiting car, leaving me standing in the doorway of the life we'd built together. A life that had just been revealed as an elaborate facade. By the morning after my birthday, my phone had become an instrument of torture. Each notification brought another piece of the public spectacle my private pain had become. I scrolled through the messages over coffee, reconstructing the events at Meredith's dinner through the fragmented accounts of friends who'd been present. Emily had sent a series of increasingly concerned texts, starting with, "Where are you? Everyone's here," and ending with, "I'm so sorry, Camille. This is horrible. Call me when you can." Manuel's blunt message simply read, "What they did was unforgivable. I left immediately. Here if you need anything." Stephen, always diplomatic to a fault, had written, "Difficult situation for everyone. Let me know if you want to talk." His careful neutrality felt like another small betrayal. The most revealing messages came from Sienna, who documented the evening's events with the detailed precision of someone who knew I'd need to understand exactly what had happened. Meredith kept checking her watch and making excuses for why we should wait to eat. Her first message read, "Now I understand she was waiting for Colby." According to Sienna, when Colby had finally arrived, alone, there had been confused questions about my whereabouts. Meredith had smoothly intercepted, suggesting I needed some space and that they should proceed with dinner. The meal had progressed with uncomfortable small talk until dessert, when Meredith had clinked her glass for attention. They stood together like they were announcing an engagement, Sienna had written. Meredith did most of the talking about how they never meant for this to happen, how they'd fought their feelings, how sometimes life surprises you with what you really need. Colby just stood there looking solemn and nodding. The reactions had been mixed. Some friends sat in stunned silence. Christine had apparently gathered her things and left without a word. Manuel had called them both disgusting before walking out. Others had remained, trapped by social awkwardness and the half-eaten meals in front of them. The most surreal detail, after their announcement, Meredith had brought out my birthday cake, my name written in elegant script across chocolate ganache, and insisted everyone sing happy birthday, despite my absence. To honor Camille in this difficult transition, she'd said, as if my displacement from my own marriage was something to be celebrated alongside my birth. I put my phone down, nauseated. The calculated performance of it all, the timing, the script, the cake, revealed a coldness I hadn't known existed in either of them. My solitude ended abruptly when Zoe, my assistant, called. "I'm sorry to bother you, but there's a situation at the studio," she said, her usually calm voice tinged with anxiety. "The Harriston clients are here for their 10 a.m. and, well, they've heard about Colby. They're asking questions about how your personal situation might affect their project." Timeline. My heart sank. The Harristons represented my largest current contract, a complete restoration of their Victorian mansion that would be featured in Architectural Digest upon completion. The project required close coordination with Colby's firm for structural elements, a collaboration we'd highlighted when securing the contract. "Tell them I'll be there in 30 minutes, I replied, already moving toward the shower. I couldn't hide in my house forever, and I refused to let Colby's actions jeopardize my professional reputation. 40 minutes later, I walked into my design studio wearing a structured navy dress, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon, makeup carefully applied to conceal my sleepless night. Nothing in my appearance betrayed the emotional earthquake of the past 24 hours. The Harristons, Margaret and Thomas, looked up from the portfolio they were reviewing, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. I'd known them for nearly a year, working closely with Margaret on every detail of their home's restoration. "Camille," Margaret began awkwardly, "we're so sorry to hear about your situation." I met her gaze directly. "Thank you for your concern. I understand. You have questions about your project." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "We just want to ensure there won't be complications with the architectural elements, given your, personal circumstances with Mr. Thompson." "My personal circumstances have no bearing on my professional commitments," I replied evenly. "The structural plans are already finalized and approved. My team and I will continue to deliver exactly what we promised, on schedule." "And Colby's firm?" Margaret pressed. "We heard rumors he might be leaving the city for a position in Boston, something Meredith Parker arranged through her foundation connections." This was news to me, Boston, but I didn't let my surprise show. Mr. Thompson's professional decisions are his own. If his firm is unable to fulfill their contractual obligations, I'll personally ensure another architect of equal caliber takes over the structural elements. Your home will not suffer because of any changes in personnel. My calm professionalism seemed to reassure them. By the end of our meeting, we were reviewing fabric samples for the master bedroom as if nothing had changed. When they left, Margaret squeezed my hand and murmured, "You're handling this with remarkable grace." If only she knew the coldness that had settled in my chest, the calculations already running through my mind. The next test came at lunch, when I forced myself to go to Luciano's, the cafe where our professional circle regularly gathered. I needed to be seen, to establish the narrative of a woman unbroken by betrayal. The restaurant fell into a hush when I entered. I spotted two of Colby's colleagues at a corner table, their eyes widening before they quickly looked away. Near the window, a group of women from Meredith's foundation froze mid-conversation, and at a center table sat Curtis Warren, Colby's business partner, dining with Eleanor Blackwood, the city's premier real estate developer and a major client of their firm. I walked directly to the hostess stand, requesting a table as if nothing were amiss. The young woman, clearly aware of the tension in the room, led me to a table directly in Eleanor's line of sight. Perfect. I ordered a salad I had no intention of eating and opened my tablet to review design plans, aware of the stolen glances and whispered conversations around me. The performance of normalcy required every ounce of my self-control, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Halfway through my meal, Curtis approached my table, his expression a carefully neutral mask. "Camille," he began, his voice low. I just wanted to say I had no idea about Colby and Meredith. None of us at the firm did. I doubted that was entirely true. Office affairs rarely remain completely secret, and Curtis and Colby had been friends since architecture school. "It's a difficult situation for everyone," I replied, deliberately echoing Stephen's non-committal words. Curtis hesitated. "The Westlake project. I'm sure you've heard Colby's being considered to lead it. I wanted you to know that your contribution to the historical assessment was acknowledged in our proposal. Your work will still be credited." How generous. My research and recommendations would help advance the career of the man who had just abandoned me, while Meredith would undoubtedly leverage her foundation's influence to ensure he secured the contract. How thoughtful, I said, my voice cool. I'm sure you and Colby will do justice to the building's historical significance. Curtis shifted uncomfortably. Colby wanted me to tell you he's sorry for how things happened. The timing was unfortunate. Unfortunate? I repeated, allowing a slight edge to enter my tone. Is that what we're calling it? Before Curtis could respond, Eleanor Blackwood appeared at his elbow. I'd met her several times at charity events. A formidable woman in her 60s who controlled half the valuable real estate in the city's downtown district. Camille, she said, her sharp eyes assessing me. I was sorry to hear about your situation. These things are always difficult, but sometimes they're for the best. Creative partnerships run their course, in business and in marriage. The dismissive way she framed my 8-year marriage as a creative partnership that had run its course made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure. Some partnerships end because they've run their course, Ms. Blackwood, I replied smoothly. Others end because of betrayal. The distinction matters, particularly when evaluating character and trustworthiness. Something to consider when entering into long-term business relationships, wouldn't you agree? Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. Curtis paled, and I knew my message had landed precisely as intended. If Colby and Meredith thought I would quietly fade into the background of our social and professional circles, accepting their version of events, they were sorely mistaken. As I paid my bill and gathered my things, I felt the weight of every gaze in the restaurant. But instead of shame, I felt a growing resolve. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them see that Camille Thompson would not be defined by what had been done to her, but by what she would do next. 3 days after my birthday, I returned home from the studio to find Meredith's silver BMW parked in my driveway. She sat on my front steps, wearing an expression of practiced contrition, a small gift bag beside her. The audacity was breathtaking. I parked on the street and approached slowly, my keys held between my fingers like a weapon, not out of any real fear, but because the physical sensation of metal pressing into my palm kept me grounded in reality. "You need to leave," I said before she could speak. Meredith stood, smoothing her cream-colored dress, always perfectly put together, even for an ambush. "Camille, please, we need to talk." Her voice carried that familiar soothing tone she used with difficult donors at her foundation events. "I know you're hurt." "Hurt?" I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "Is that what you call it when your husband of 8 years leaves you for your best friend of 15 years? On your birthday? Hurt seems inadequate." She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that. We never meant to fall in love. To betray me? To humiliate me publicly?" I interrupted, still standing on the sidewalk, unwilling to move closer. "Which part wasn't supposed to happen, Meredith?" "The timing," she admitted. "Colby wasn't supposed to leave until after we'd talked to you. We had a plan to sit down together, the three of us, and explain everything calmly." She gestured helplessly. "But he came home and just decided. He said he couldn't pretend for another day." The casual cruelty of her words struck me like a physical blow. They had planned it all, had a script, a timeline for dismantling my life. Their only regret was the messy execution. "And the dinner at your house? Serving my birthday cake after announcing you were sleeping with my husband?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Meredith at least had the decency to flush. "That was a mistake. I panicked. Everyone was there, expecting a celebration, and I didn't know what to do." She picked up the gift bag beside her. "I brought this. I don't want anything from you," I cut her off. "Not explanations, not apologies, and certainly not gifts. It's your grandmother's pearl bracelet," she said quietly. "You left it at my house last month. I thought you might want it back." Of course. The bracelet I'd removed before helping her repaint her guest bathroom, a project I'd volunteered for because that's what friends do. I'd forgotten about it entirely in the chaos of the past few days. "Leave it on the step," I said, unwilling to move closer, unwilling to accept anything directly from her hands. She placed the bag down carefully. "Camille, I know you probably hate me right now." "I don't hate you, Meredith," I interrupted, surprising myself with the truth of it. "Hate requires energy I'm not willing to spend on you anymore. What I feel is something closer to professional admiration. The precision of your betrayal was impressive. The way you leveraged everything I ever confided in you against me? Masterful." Her eyes widened. "It wasn't like that, wasn't it? All those coffee dates where I shared my fears about fertility issues straining our marriage. All those times you encouraged me to give Colby space when he seemed distant. You weren't supporting me. You were creating opportunities." Meredith shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You're making it sound calculated. It wasn't. We fought it for months." "How noble of you," I replied coldly. "And Boston? When were you going to mention you're helping him relocate his practice?" She looked genuinely startled. "How did you—" "Our world is smaller than you think, Meredith. People talk." I moved toward my front steps at last, careful to maintain distance between us. "Now, please leave. You've taken enough from me already." "He misses you," she blurted as I passed her. "Not romantically, but as a friend. We both do. We're hoping that eventually, when the pain subsides, Maybe we can all— The laugh that escaped me held no humor. You can't possibly be suggesting we all remain friends. Not right away, of course, she hurried to explain. But eventually. We care about you, Camille. We don't want to lose you completely. The delusion was almost impressive. Let me be very clear, I said, meeting her gaze directly. You and Colby don't get to decide what happens next. You don't get to orchestrate my response the way you orchestrated your affair. You don't get to ease your guilt by maintaining some twisted friendship. You've made your choice, now live with it. I unlocked my front door and stepped inside without looking back, closing it firmly on her protests. Through the window, I watched her stand uncertainly for a moment before returning to her car. Only when she'd driven away did I retrieve the gift bag from the step, extracting my grandmother's bracelet and discarding the bag and its tissue paper in the outdoor trash. Inside, I leaned against the closed door, the pearl bracelet cool against my palm. The confrontation had left me shaking, but not with grief or weakness, with the electric current of reclaimed power. I moved to my home office and opened my laptop, my encounter with Meredith crystallizing something I'd been considering since my conversation with Eleanor Blackwood. If Boston was indeed their destination, I needed to understand exactly what that meant for my professional and financial security. A quick search confirmed what Eleanor had hinted. The Boston Heritage Foundation, a sister organization to Meredith's current employer, had recently announced a major architectural initiative to revitalize historical properties in the city's downtown. The kind of project that would be perfect for an architect with Colby's expertise in blending modern functionality with historical preservation. The kind of project Meredith, with her extensive foundation connections, could easily have arranged. For him, I dug deeper, following digital breadcrumbs through professional networks and industry publications. An hour later, I had confirmation. Colby's firm had been shortlisted for the Boston project, with the final decision expected next month. The timing aligned perfectly with the Westlake announcement here. He'd secure both contracts, establish his reputation on the Westlake renovation, then transition to Boston for the larger, more prestigious project. A clean professional exit to match his personal one. I sat back, absorbing the implications. Colby wouldn't just be leaving me. He'd be leaving our city, taking his half of our shared professional network and client base with him. The convenient distance would spare him, the messiness of seeing me at industry events or running into mutual friends. Meredith would transition to the Boston Foundation's board, leveraging her successful fundraising record for a step up the professional ladder. They'd create a new life together, unburdened by the wreckage they'd left behind. Unless I did something about it. I opened a new document and began typing, creating a detailed timeline of events and connections, not out of vindictiveness, but out of strategic necessity. I needed to understand exactly what I was facing and what leverage I might have. By midnight, my initial anger had crystallized into something more focused, more purposeful. I now had clarity about what Colby and Meredith had taken from me. My marriage, my closest friendship, my sense of security, potentially part of my professional network. But they'd overlooked something crucial. They'd left me with intimate knowledge of their ambitions, their methods, their weaknesses. Knowledge I had no ethical obligation to protect any longer. As I finally prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. For the first time since my birthday, I recognized myself again. The shock had faded from my eyes, replaced by a calm determination. This woman wasn't a victim awaiting rescue or a scorned wife plotting revenge. This was a woman who understood that the best response to betrayal wasn't emotional outburst, but strategic action. A woman who recognized that while Colby and Meredith had written the first chapters of this story, they wouldn't control how it ended. That power belonged to me now. The morning after Meredith's unwelcome visit, I made a decision. I would strategically withdraw from our shared social circles. Not out of shame or heartbreak, but to create space for clear thinking and calculated action. I needed distance from the whispers, the pitying glances, and the endless questions. Most importantly, I needed Colby and Meredith to believe they'd won completely, that I was too devastated to fight back. I called Zoe at the studio and explained that I'd be working from home for the next few days. Reschedule all non-essential meetings. For client presentations that can't be postponed, prepare the materials and I'll review them remotely. Say I'm dealing with a family emergency if anyone asks. Of course, Zoe replied, her tone professional despite her obvious concern. The Harristons called, by the way. They've decided to proceed with the project as discussed. Mrs. Harriston specifically mentioned she wants to work with you regardless of other circumstances. A small victory. Send her a handwritten thank you note from me. Use the cream stationery with the embossed letterhead. Next, I called Christine. I need a recommendation for a divorce attorney, I said without preamble. Someone ruthless but discreet. Vivian Morales, Christine replied immediately. She's the best in the city for high-profile complex divorces. I'll text you her number. But Camille, are you sure you're ready for this? It's only been a few days. I'm not filing immediately, I explained. But I need to understand my options before Colby and his lawyers start dictating terms. After calling Vivian and scheduling a consultation for the following day, I silenced my phone and turned to the one place where I could think most clearly, my design workspace. The spare bedroom we'd converted into my personal studio had always been my sanctuary, with its north-facing windows providing perfect natural light for assessing color samples and material textures. I cleared the drafting table and began creating a different kind of design board, one that mapped my current situation and possible paths forward. First, I listed my assets, my established interior design business with its loyal client base, my professional reputation built over a decade of award-winning work, the intellectual property of my designs, and my network of artisans and suppliers. I owned half our home outright, plus my studio space downtown. My personal savings remained separate from our joint accounts. Most valuable of all, 15 years of intimate knowledge about Meredith's professional methods, personal weaknesses, and carefully constructed public image. 8 years of similar insights about Colby. Next, I assessed the threats, potential damage to my professional reputation if clients associated me with scandal or instability, possible financial strain if the divorce became contentious, the emotional toll of redefining my life's framework, and the social complications of events where Colby, Meredith, and I would all be present. Finally, I mapped relationships, categorizing our shared connections based on their likely allegiances. Some would automatically side with Colby and Meredith. Others would support me unfailingly. Most would attempt neutrality, unwilling to choose sides in what they perceived as an uncomfortable personal matter. The resulting diagram revealed clear patterns and potential pressure points. By late afternoon, I had the outline of a strategy. Not for revenge, which would be ultimately unsatisfying, but for reclaiming and rebuilding my life on my own terms. I was interrupted by a knock at the front door. Through the peephole, I saw Emily standing on my porch, holding a bottle of wine and a bag from our favorite bakery. I hesitated before opening the door. Emily had been part of our friend group since college. My friend first, then Meredith's by association. I wasn't ready for another painful conversation. I brought provisions, she said when I finally opened the door, her usual bubbly personality subdued. And absolutely no advice or platitudes, I promise. I let her in, grateful for her straightforward approach. In the kitchen, she uncorked the wine while I found glasses. I don't know the protocol for this situation, Emily admitted. Am I supposed to never mention their names? Trash talk them constantly? Pretend nothing happened? I have no idea, I replied honestly. I'm making this up as I go. Emily nodded, handing me a glass of Merlot. For what it's worth, I think they're both being delusional. At the dinner, after you didn't show up, Meredith kept saying how she hoped you'd understand once the initial shock passed. Like betrayal is just a temporary inconvenience. She came by yesterday, I said, taking a sip of wine. Brought back my grandmother's bracelet and suggested we might all be friends again someday. Emily nearly choked on her wine. You're kidding. What did you say? I told her they don't get to orchestrate my response the way they orchestrated their affair. Good for you. Emily studied me for a moment. You seem different than I expected. More focused, less devastated, I supplied. Oh, I'm devastated, but I'm also determined not to let that devastation define me or my next steps. We moved to the living room, where Emily noticed my design board still visible through the open studio door. Working on a new project already? I hesitated, then decided partial honesty was best. In a manner of speaking, I'm mapping out the divorce process and what comes after. Emily nodded, not pushing for details. Instead, she filled me in on mutual friends' reactions to the situation. Stephen had apparently called Colby to express his disappointment, mild, by most standards, but significant coming from conflict-averse Stephen. Manuel had removed both Colby and Meredith from his upcoming gallery opening guest list. Christine was telling anyone who would listen that Meredith had violated the most basic codes of female friendship. And Sienna is caught in the middle, Emily continued. She's furious with Meredith, but still her sister. Their parents are apparently divided too. Their father thinks Meredith crossed an unforgivable line, while their mother is taking the heart wants what it wants position. This information about family dynamics might prove useful later. I filed it away mentally. What about you? I asked. This puts you in an awkward position with the whole group. Emily shrugged. Not really. I've always been your friend first. Meredith was just part of the package. She refilled our glasses. Besides, I've always found her a bit exhausting. All that perfect hostess, community leader, patron of the arts performance. It gets old. We spent the next hour talking about everything except Colby and Meredith, Emily's job at the university library, the historical fiction novel she was writing, her sister's new baby. The normalcy was soothing, a reminder that parts of my life remained untouched by betrayal. After Emily left, promising to check in again soon, I returned to my workspace with renewed clarity. Her visit had reinforced something important. While Colby and Meredith had each other and their shiny new future, I had authentic relationships they'd underestimated. People who genuinely cared about me beyond social convenience or professional advantage. I added this insight to my strategy board, then turned to my laptop. Withdrawing socially didn't mean becoming inactive. It meant working quietly, methodically, gathering information while they assumed I was nursing my wounds. Started with a deep dive into the Boston project Meredith had arranged for Colby. The Heritage Foundation's website provided basic information, but I needed details about selection criteria, timeline, and competing firms. For that, I needed someone on the inside. I scrolled through my professional contacts, stopping at Julian Marsh, a preservation specialist I'd collaborated with on several projects who had recently relocated to Boston. We'd maintained friendly professional relations, occasionally referring clients to each other. More importantly, he consulted regularly with the Heritage Foundation. My email to him was carefully crafted. Congratulations on his recent award. Questions. About a potential client with properties in Boston. Casual mention of hearing about the Heritage Foundation's revitalization project. Nothing that indicated personal interest or suggested I knew about Colby's involvement. By midnight, I had sent similar innocuous inquiries to contacts at 2 architectural journals, a former client who sat on the board of a preservation society, with ties to the Boston project, and a materials supplier who worked extensively with historical renovations in New England. Each message was framed as routine professional networking. None mentioned Colby or Meredith. All were designed to gather pieces of a puzzle they didn't know I was assembling. As I prepared for bed, my phone showed 3 missed calls from Colby. No voicemails, no texts, just the calls, all within the past hour. Testing the waters, perhaps, seeing if I'd answer. I didn't. Whatever he wanted to say could wait until I'd consulted with Vivian Morales tomorrow. Whatever emotional manipulation or practical arrangements he was planning, I needed legal counsel before engaging. For the first time since my birthday, I slept deeply, without dreams. The initial shock had passed, replaced by a clarity of purpose that, if not healing, was at least fortifying. Colby and Meredith had written the first act of this drama according to their script. But they had severely underestimated who would be directing the final scenes. The offices of Morales and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, with sweeping views of the river. Vivian Morales herself was nothing like I'd expected. Based on Christine's description of her as ruthless, I'd imagined someone severe and intimidating. Instead, the woman who greeted me was petite, soft-spoken, and grandmotherly until she began speaking about divorce law. Then her eyes sharpened, her voice took on a precise, authoritative tone, and I understood exactly why she had a reputation for leaving opposing counsel scrambling. "Tell me everything," she instructed after preliminary introductions. Legal pad, at the ready. Start with assets, then move to the circumstances of separation. Don't edit or minimize. I need the complete picture. For the next hour, I detailed our financial situation, property ownership, business entanglements, and the events leading to Colby's departure. Vivian took meticulous notes, occasionally interrupting with clarifying questions. Her expression, betraying neither judgment nor sympathy. "Now?" she said when I finished. "Tell me what you want." The directness of the question caught me off guard. "I want a fair settlement. The house, my business protected, my share of our investments." Vivian's gaze was penetrating. "That's what you're entitled to. I'm asking what you want." I considered this distinction carefully. I want to emerge from this divorce with my professional reputation intact. I want to ensure that neither Colby nor Meredith can control the narrative about what happened or influence my standing in our industry. And I want a clean break that allows me to rebuild without their shadows hanging over me. Vivian nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. "Good, now we can develop a strategy." She outlined the standard divorce process, but emphasized that our situation warranted special consideration given the professional entanglements and potential reputational impacts. Your husband's behavior, leaving on your birthday, the public. Announcement at what was supposed to be your celebration, moving directly in with your best friend, gives us certain advantages, she explained. A judge would view these actions as particularly callous. However, she continued, raising a cautionary finger, emotional aspects won't significantly impact financial settlements in our state. They might influence negotiation leverage, but ultimately, assets will be divided according to established legal principles. She then moved to more practical matters, gathering financial documents, securing digital accounts, documenting valuable possessions, and preparing for various scenarios. Colby and his lawyers might pursue one more thing, she said as our consultation concluded. You mentioned the Boston project. If your husband secures this contract before divorce proceedings begin, it could significantly impact valuation of his business assets. The timing matters. How long do we have? I asked. Based on what you've told me, the announcement for the Westlake project here is next week. The Boston decision follows a month later. We should file after Westlake but before Boston. Optimal timing would be approximately 3 weeks from now. I left Vivian's office with a comprehensive to-do list and a clearer understanding of the path ahead. The legal aspects were just one component of my emerging strategy, but knowing the timeline and potential leverage points was crucial. My next stop was the city records office, a mundane governmental building where public documents were stored. I requested access to historical preservation filings, architectural permits, and zoning applications for the Westlake Hotel renovation. As one of the consultants on the initial assessment, I had legitimate professional reasons to review these materials. For 3 hours, I methodically examined every document related to the project, taking photos with my phone when I found something significant. Most of it was standard information I already knew: historical details, structural assessments, proposed modifications. But buried in the supporting documentation for Colby's firm's proposal was something unexpected: Meredith's signature on a letter of recommendation from her foundation. The letter predated our birthday by 4 months, which meant she had been professionally supporting Colby's bid for the Westlake project while simultaneously beginning their affair. Even more interesting, the letter referenced our previous collaboration on the Wilson Theater restoration, implying her foundation had worked directly with Colby's firm on that project. But I knew for a fact that Meredith's foundation had not been involved with the Wilson Theater. My design firm had been the primary preservation consultant, with Colby's architectural team handling structural elements. Meredith had attended the opening gala as my guest, nothing more. She had falsified her professional involvement to bolster Colby's application for the Westlake project. A small deception, perhaps, but potentially meaningful if the selection committee had weighed her foundation's endorsement heavily in their decision-making. I photographed the letter and continued my research. By closing time, I had compiled enough documentation to understand the complete picture of the Westlake project's approval process, including who had made the final decisions and what criteria they had used. As I drove home, my phone rang with a call from Julian Marsh, my Boston contact. I connected it through the car's Bluetooth. "Camille, got your email," Julian said after we exchanged pleasantries. "Interesting timing. I was just in a meeting about that Heritage Foundation project you mentioned." "Oh?" I kept my tone casually interested. "Sounds like an impressive initiative." "Absolutely massive. 6 historical buildings being converted to mixed-use spaces while maintaining architectural integrity. Budgets north of $50 million. He paused. "Actually, your husband's firm is on the short list. Did you know that?" "I'd heard rumors," I replied carefully. "Colby and I don't discuss pending projects much these days." Julian made a sound of sympathy. "Right. I heard about your situation. Sorry about that. Must be awkward professionally." "These things happen," I said, deliberately vague. "What's the word on who might get the Heritage contract?" Initially, Thompson and Warren was leading the pack. Their proposal hit all the right notes, and they have strong endorsements from some foundation board members. He lowered his voice slightly. Between us, Meredith Parker's recommendation carried significant weight. She's joining the Boston Foundation's board next quarter, and they're eager to accommodate her preferences. So Meredith's influence extended beyond simply helping Colby apply. She was actively using her new board position to secure his selection. The pieces were fitting together with uncomfortable clarity. "But there's been a complication," Julian continued. "Parker's recommendation is being scrutinized now that her personal relationship with Thompson has come to light. Some board members are concerned about potential conflicts of interest and whether proper protocols were followed. The final decision's been delayed by 2 weeks. This was valuable information, both the delay and the scrutiny of Meredith's role." "Thanks for the insight, Julian. This helps with my market research." "No problem. Oh, and if you're looking for opportunities in Boston, let me know. There's increasing demand for specialists in historical interiors, especially with these preservation projects ramping up." After we disconnected, I sat in my parked car, processing this new information. The Boston Heritage Foundation was questioning Meredith's recommendation now that her relationship with Colby was public knowledge. This created both opportunity and urgency, a narrow window where their professional plans remained vulnerable. By the time I entered my house, I had received responses from 2 other contacts, each providing additional pieces of the puzzle. The architecture journal editor confirmed that Colby was already being profiled for their Designers on the Move feature, highlighting his transition to the Boston market. My Preservation Society contact mentioned hearing about ethical concerns regarding the selection process for the Heritage Project. I added these details to my growing research file, then turned to my design board. The strategy was taking shape. I wasn't interested in revenge. That was a reactive emotional response that ultimately changed nothing. I wanted something more substantial, a resolution that allowed me to reclaim my narrative and rebuild my life on my terms. The question wasn't how to hurt Colby and Meredith. The question was how to use their own actions and ambitions to create an outcome that served my interests. As I studied the connections and timelines I'd mapped, one conclusion became increasingly clear. I didn't need to destroy their relationship or their plans. I just needed to ensure they understood exactly what those plans would cost them. 5 days after Colby's departure, I returned to my design studio full-time. The strategic withdrawal had served its purpose. I'd consulted with Vivian, gathered crucial information, and outlined my approach. Now it was time to present a carefully crafted public face. The professional woman focused on her work, neither broken by betrayal nor consumed by bitterness. "You look good," Zoe remarked when I arrived, her tone suggesting she'd expected something closer to a walking disaster. Very put together. I'd chosen my outfit deliberately, a structured navy, dress that conveyed authority, paired with the vintage silver earrings I'd bought myself after my first major design commission. Nothing that Colby had given me, nothing that reminded me of our shared life. This was Camille Thompson, design professional, not Camille Thompson, abandoned wife. "Thank you," I replied, moving toward my office. "Let's review today's schedule." The morning passed in a blur of client calls, material selections, and project updates. I maintained perfect composure, discussing fabric choices and architectural details as if my personal life hadn't imploded less than a week earlier. Only once, when a supplier casually asked about Colby's input on a joint project, did I feel a momentary tightening in my chest. I smoothly redirected the conversation without missing a beat. "The project has transitioned to my exclusive management," I said, my tone leaving no room for further questions. "Now, about those custom hardware options." Lunch brought my first significant test. The Westlake Hotel Project Committee had scheduled their official announcement ceremony for the following week, and their coordinator called to confirm my attendance. "We'd love to have you there, Ms. Thompson," she said. "Your historical assessment was instrumental in developing the preservation guidelines." "Who else from the project team will be attending?" I asked, knowing full well Colby would be front and center as the selected architect. "Representatives from all major contributors," she replied diplomatically. "The reception afterward will be an excellent networking opportunity." The thought of watching Colby receive public accolades, potentially with Meredith at his side, made my stomach clench. But declining would be interpreted as professional weakness or personal bitterness. Neither perception served my long-term interests. "I'll be there," I confirmed. "Please send the formal invitation to my office email." After the call, I stepped into the small courtyard behind my studio, needing a moment alone. The spring air carried the scent of flowering dogwoods, incongruously pleasant against my inner turmoil. This would be my first public event where I might encounter both Colby and Meredith together. The anticipation alone was exhausting. My phone buzzed with a text from Christine. "Lunch? I'm at Café Provence around the corner." 20 minutes later, I slid into a chair across from her at the sunny sidewalk cafe, grateful for the distraction. Morales. "Called me," Christine said after we'd ordered. "She said you impressed her." "High praise, apparently. You made her sound terrifying." Christine smiled. "She is terrifying. To opponents. To clients she believes in, she's a guardian angel with a law degree. She studied me over her water glass. How are you really doing? And don't give me the polished professional answer you're giving everyone else. I sighed, momentarily dropping. The mask I'd worn all morning. Exhausted, angry, sometimes still shocked that this is actually happening. But mostly, focused. I can't change what they did, but I can control what happens next. Christine nodded approvingly. That's exactly the right mindset, and exactly why Vivian was impressed. She leaned forward. Now, about the Westlake announcement. I assume you're going. Just confirmed this morning. Good. Colby will certainly be there, probably with Meredith, given their new public status. You'll need to be prepared. I'd been avoiding thinking about the specifics of that encounter. Any advice from someone who's seen this scenario play out before? Christine considered this. Arrive exactly on time. Not early, not late. Speak to the project coordinators immediately to establish your professional presence. Stay for the announcement and 30 minutes of the reception, focusing on valuable contacts. Then make a graceful exit with a plausible excuse about another commitment. And if they approach me? Polite, brief, public. She replied without hesitation. Nothing that could be interpreted as emotional or unprofessional. Save any substantive conversations for when you have legal representation present. She paused. Has Colby contacted you directly since he left? 3 missed calls the night before last. No messages. Nothing since. Christine's expression turned thoughtful. Interesting timing. That was right after the committee meeting where they finalized the Westlake announcement details. She tapped her fingernails against her water glass. My guess? He wanted to make sure you wouldn't create a scene at the ceremony. The suggestion stung, but it made tactical sense. Colby would be concerned about protecting his professional moment of triumph. My potential presence and reaction would be an unpredictable variable in his otherwise perfectly orchestrated success story. Well, I said, straightening my shoulders, he'll be relieved to see that I'm the consummate professional. Exactly, Christine agreed. Let him worry about how you'll behave. Let him wonder what you're planning. The uncertainty alone will be uncomfortable for someone as controlling as Colby. After lunch, I returned to the studio with renewed purpose. My afternoon included a presentation to potential clients, a couple restoring a Queen Anne Victorian, in the Garden District. As I guided them through material options and preservation approaches, I found myself genuinely engaged in the creative process, momentarily forgetting the personal drama looming over my life. Your passion for historical accuracy balanced with livability is exactly what we're looking for, the wife commented as they prepared to leave. We'd like to move forward with you as our designer. This small victory, securing a significant new project based solely on my expertise and vision, bolstered my confidence. My professional identity remained intact despite the personal turmoil. By evening, I had successfully navigated an entire day of appearing normal, competent, and unaffected. The performance was exhausting, but necessary. As I packed up my materials, Zoe appeared in my office doorway. There's someone here to see you, she said, her expression uncharacteristically hesitant. Curtis Warren. Colby's business partner was the last person I expected to visit my studio. We'd had a cordial professional relationship over the years, but never particularly close. Send him in, I said, mentally shifting back into my composed professional persona. Curtis entered cautiously, as if approaching unpredictable terrain. Camille, thank you for seeing me. I know this is awkward. What can I do for you, Curtis? I kept my tone neutral, neither warm nor cold. He placed a thick envelope on my desk. The finalized drawings for the Harriston project. Colby completed them before. He wanted to make sure you had everything you needed to continue without disruption. I eyed the envelope without touching it. He could have couriered these or emailed the files. Curtis shifted uncomfortably. He thought a personal delivery would be more appropriate. He wanted me to tell you that he's committed to fulfilling all professional obligations despite the personal situation. How magnanimous. My husband abandons me on my birthday, but wants to ensure our professional collaborations continue seamlessly. Thank you for delivering these, I said evenly. Is there anything else? Curtis hesitated, clearly having been tasked with gathering intelligence beyond the simple delivery. Colby mentioned you haven't returned his calls. He's concerned about logistics, personal belongings, financial matters. My attorney will be in touch regarding those issues, I replied, the practiced line rolling off my tongue as Vivian had advised. Any communication about the divorce should go through proper legal channels. Something flickered across Curtis's face. Surprise, perhaps. I don't think he's retained counsel yet. This is all still very recent. I maintained my neutral expression while internally noting this information. Colby hadn't hired a divorce attorney yet. Either he was preoccupied with the Westlake and Boston projects, or he was hoping to handle our separation more informally. Either way, it confirmed Vivian's advice about timing. Nevertheless, that's my preference moving forward, I stated firmly. Will you be attending the Westlake announcement next week? The abrupt subject change caught him off guard. Yes, of course. The entire firm will be there. It's a significant achievement for us. Indeed. I'll see you there then. Curtis looked momentarily alarmed. You're attending? My historical assessment was part of the foundation for the entire project, I reminded him. The committee specifically requested my presence. Right, of course. He backed toward the door. Well, good night, Camille. And I'm sorry about everything. For what it's worth, the situation at the office has been tense. Not everyone approves of how things were handled. After he left, I waited several minutes before opening the envelope. Inside were indeed the Harriston project drawings, meticulously detailed in Colby's distinctive style. But they weren't the only contents. A smaller envelope had been tucked between the large drawing sheets, my name written in Colby's handwriting. I stared at it for a long moment, then placed it in my desk drawer without opening it. Whatever Colby had to say could wait until I was prepared to hear it on my terms, not his. As I drove home, I reflected on the day's performances, mine and others. I had presented the image of professional composure. Curtis had played the awkward but well-meaning messenger. And somewhere across town, Colby was undoubtedly casting himself as the conscientious professional, despite personal complications. Everyone was performing their chosen role in this drama. The difference was that I alone understood it was a performance. They still believed in the parts they were playing, and that gave me an advantage I intended to use. The weekend before the Westlake announcement arrived with unexpected sunshine after days of spring rain. I'd planned to spend it reviewing client proposals and preparing for the week ahead, but Christine called Saturday morning with different ideas. We're having brunch at Riverfront Terrace, she announced without preamble. You, me, and Emily. No discussion. I started to protest, but Christine cut me off. You've been holed up working for days. A few hours of normal social interaction won't derail your strategic planning. She was right, of course. I'd been isolating myself, using work as both shield and sword. Some semblance of normal life would help maintain my mental equilibrium. Riverfront Terrace was an upscale cafe overlooking the city's waterfront promenade, popular with the weekend brunch crowd. As I approached our reserved table, on the patio, I spotted Christine and Emily already sharing a carafe of mimosas. You look fantastic, Emily exclaimed as I sat down. That haircut is perfect on you. I'd visited my stylist the previous day, cutting my long waves into a sleek, shoulder-length bob. The change wasn't dramatic, but it was noticeable. A small reclamation of my image, distinct from the woman Colby had left behind. Thanks, I replied, pouring myself a mimosa. Small changes for a new chapter. We fell into easy conversation about Emily's latest writing project and Christine's recent court victory. The simple pleasure of female friendship without ulterior motives or hidden agendas felt like oxygen after days of calculated interactions, as see. Our food arrived, Christine casually mentioned. Sienna texted me this morning. Apparently, there's trouble in paradise already. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. What kind of trouble? They had a public argument at Dalloway's last night. Something about Boston timing and professional boundaries. Meredith stormed out, and Colby sat alone at the bar looking miserable for an hour afterward. Dalloway's was an upscale restaurant frequented by the city's professional elite, exactly the kind of place Meredith would choose to showcase their relationship. The fact that they'd argued there, where they might be observed by colleagues and competitors, was telling. Interesting, I said, resuming my meal with feigned casualness. But not surprising. New relationships built on betrayal rarely start smoothly. Emily leaned forward. There's more. According to Sienna, Meredith's been complaining that Colby's unexpectedly traditional about certain things. Apparently, she suggested they house hunt in Boston next weekend, and he pushed back, saying it was too soon to make joint financial commitments. This was valuable intelligence. Colby was hesitating about making permanent arrangements with Meredith even as they planned their professional transition to Boston. Perhaps the reality of their choice was beginning to sink in beyond the initial excitement of forbidden romance. As we continued our brunch, I absorbed this information while maintaining light conversation. Outwardly, I portrayed mild disinterest in my soon-to-be ex-husband's new relationship struggles. Inwardly, I was cataloging every detail for future reference. After brunch, we walked along the river promenade, enjoying the spring sunshine. I was about to suggest visiting a nearby art installation when Christine subtly touched my arm, directing my attention across the walking path. There, emerging from a home furnishings boutique, were Colby and Meredith. They hadn't noticed us yet. I had a moment to observe them unawares. Colby carrying shopping bags, Meredith pointing out something in a store window. They looked like any couple enjoying a weekend shopping trip, except for the slight stiffness in Colby's posture and the performative way Meredith linked her arm through his when another couple walked past. "We can go the other way," Emily whispered. "No need," I replied calmly. This was inevitable. Meredith spotted us first. I watched her expression shift rapidly. Surprise, discomfort, then a forced smile as she nudged Colby. When he turned and saw me, he seemed to freeze momentarily before regaining his composure. We converged on the walking path, that peculiar collision of people who know each other intimately, yet suddenly find themselves strangers. "Camille," Meredith greeted with artificial brightness. "You look wonderful. I love the new haircut." "Thank you," I replied, my tone pleasant but distant. Colby looked less certain of his script. "How are you?" he asked, his voice carrying genuine concern that grated on my nerves more than Meredith's fake cheer. "Busy with work," I answered. "The Harriston project is moving forward nicely. Thank you for sending the drawings through Curtis." His eyes flickered briefly to my purse, where he perhaps wondered if I carried his unread note. "Good. That's good. Did you have a chance to—" "We're actually running late for an appointment," Christine interrupted smoothly. "Nice to see you both." The lie was transparent but effective. We continued past them, maintaining our pace until we turned a corner onto a side street. "Well, that was awkward," Emily exhaled once we were out of earshot. "But informative," I noted. "Did you see the shopping bags? From Maison Blanc, they sell high-end kitchenware and table linens." Christine raised an eyebrow. "Nesting already?" "Exactly. Despite their apparent argument about Boston house hunting being too soon, they're shopping for domestic items. Meredith's establishing their couplehood through material possessions. You noticed all that in a 30-second interaction?" Emily looked impressed. I spent 8 years with Colby and 15 with Meredith. I know their patterns. I glanced back toward the promenade. Colby hates shopping on weekends. Too crowded, he always said. Yet there he was, carrying her bags on a Saturday afternoon. He's trying to prove himself to her. As we continued our afternoon, eventually parting ways with promises to check in, before the Westlake event, I found myself reflecting on that brief encounter. Beyond the awkwardness and pain lay valuable insights about their relationship dynamic. Meredith had been performing. The affectionate touches, the exaggerated friendliness, all designed to project an image of happy new love. Colby had seemed less comfortable, his concern about my well-being perhaps genuine but also self-serving, a way to ease his own guilt. Most telling was what wasn't said or done. Neither had mentioned Boston directly. Meredith hadn't referenced their plan to announce their relationship at my birthday dinner. Colby hadn't acknowledged the note he'd sent with the drawings. They were editing their narrative, smoothing over the uglier aspects of their choices to make their story more palatable, primarily to themselves. Sunday morning brought an unexpected development. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number, which a quick search revealed belonged to the city planner for historical districts. Reviewing Westlake documentation for Tuesday's announcement. Noticed irregularities in foundation. Endorsement process. Available to discuss privately. Professional courtesy before public event. I arranged to meet him that afternoon at a quiet cafe far from our usual professional haunts. Robert Chen had overseen the city's historical preservation efforts for over a decade, known for his meticulous attention to procedure and ethical standards. "Thank you for meeting on short notice," he said after we'd ordered coffee. "I wanted to speak with you directly, given your involvement in the initial assessment." "What kind of irregularities concerned you?" I asked. Robert placed a folder on the table. "The proposal from Thompson and Warren received unusually strong endorsement from the Parker Foundation. Nothing improper on its face, except when I cross-referenced with previous foundation involvement." He opened the folder to reveal the same letter I'd discovered in the city records, Meredith's falsified claim of collaboration on the Wilson Theater project. "The foundation had no documented role in that restoration," Robert continued. "I checked all permits, funding applications, and acknowledgments. Yet Ms. Parker's letter cites it as evidence of successful prior collaboration, which appears to have influenced the selection committee significantly." "I see," I said carefully. "And you're bringing this to me because you were the actual preservation consultant on the Wilson Theater, and your husband's firm is now benefiting from what appears to be a misrepresentation. Given the recent personal developments that have become public, I'm concerned about potential ethics violations that could complicate the Westlake project." He looked uncomfortable but determined. "The announcement is Tuesday. If there are issues that could derail the project later, better to address them now." As I drove home after our meeting, my mind raced with implications. Robert's discovery created both opportunity and complication. The false endorsement could potentially jeopardize Colby's selection for both the Westlake and Boston projects. But using this information required careful consideration of the consequences, not just for Colby and Meredith, but for my own professional standing. I needed time to think, to weigh options against objectives. What I wanted wasn't revenge, but restoration of my dignity, my agency, my future on my terms. The Westlake announcement was less than 48 hours away. Whatever I decided would need to be precisely timed and executed with perfect control. As evening fell, I opened my laptop and began drafting contingency plans for multiple scenarios. Like any good designer, I knew that preparation was everything. Success often looked like inspiration to outside observers, but those who achieved it knew better. It was always about the blueprint. Tuesday morning dawned with a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt since before my birthday. The Westlake Hotel announcement ceremony would begin at 11 a.m., with a reception to follow. By evening, Colby would be publicly celebrated as the visionary architect chosen to restore one of the city's most beloved landmarks. unless something changed. The narrative. I dressed with careful intention. A structured crimson dress that commanded attention without appearing flashy, paired with subtle gold jewelry and the vintage Cartier watch I'd bought myself after my first major design award. My newly cropped hair framed my face with precise angles that emphasized my cheekbones and jawline. The woman in the mirror looked confident, successful, and utterly self-possessed. At 9 a.m., I placed 2 calls. The first was to Vivian Morales. "I'd like to accelerate our timeline," I told her after explaining the situation with Robert Chen and the falsified endorsement letter. If Colby's selection for the Westlake project is compromised, it could significantly impact both his firm's valuation and the Boston opportunity. "Understood," Vivian replied. "I can have preliminary paperwork ready by tomorrow morning. But Camille," she added, her tone cautionary, "are you certain you want to proceed this way? Once certain wheels are in motion, they can't easily be stopped. I might." "Certain," I replied, "but I'd like to keep our options open depending on how today unfolds." My second call was to Julian Marsh in Boston. Our conversation was brief but productive. He agreed to confidentially inquire about the Heritage Foundation's due diligence process for verifying professional references and endorsements. Just as market research, I emphasized. Nothing that would raise flags about specific candidates. By 10:30, I was parked near the Westlake Hotel, a grand 1920s building whose elegant facade had weathered decades of changing city landscapes around it. The restoration would be a career-defining project for whoever led it. Prestige, publicity, and the chance to leave a lasting mark on the city's architectural heritage. The main entrance was already busy with media, project stakeholders, and curious onlookers. I waited in my car, watching the arrivals. Curtis Warren entered first, followed by several junior architects from their firm. Eleanor Blackwood made a characteristically grand entrance, stopping to speak with reporters about her investment group's vision for the property. At precisely 10:45, Colby's Audi pulled up to the curb. He emerged looking every inch the successful architect in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. Meredith stepped out from the passenger side, resplendent in an emerald dress that complemented her blonde hair. They paused for photos, Meredith's hand resting possessively on Colby's arm as they smiled for the cameras. The performance was polished, practiced, a united front of professional success and personal happiness. Only someone who knew them intimately would notice the slight tension in Colby's jaw, or the way Meredith's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. At 10:55, I exited my car and walked toward the hotel entrance, timing my arrival to coincide with the last of the attendees. As I climbed the marble steps, I felt my phone vibrate with a text from Julian. Boston Foundation conducting emergency review of all finalist endorsements. Confidential for now, but announcement likely delayed. The dominoes were beginning to fall. Inside the hotel's grand ballroom, the restoration committee had arranged a presentation area with architectural renderings and historical photographs. Attendees mingled near a refreshment table, the buzz of conversation filling the ornate space. I moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting a glass of champagne and exchanging pleasantries with industry colleagues. I spotted Colby near the main display, surrounded by committee members and potential investors. Meredith stood slightly apart, engaged in animated conversation with 2 women from her foundation. Neither had noticed my arrival yet. Robert Chen approached me, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes communicating silent question. "Ms. Thompson, glad you could attend. Your historical assessment was instrumental in shaping our approach to this project." "I wouldn't have missed it," I replied with a genuine smile. "The Westlake deserves preservation that honors its original character while adapting to contemporary needs." "Exactly our thinking," he agreed. "Will you be working with Thompson and Warren on the implementation phase?" Before I could answer, Eleanor Blackwood joined our conversation, champagne flute in hand. "Camille, darling, you look marvelous. This awkward situation hasn't dimmed your sparkle at all. Her gaze flicked meaningfully toward Colby and Meredith. Professional commitments transcend personal circumstances, Eleanor, I replied smoothly. We all want what's best for the Westlake. Indeed, Robert interjected, which reminds me of the matter we discussed Sunday. I've brought it to the committee chair's attention. They're concerned. Eleanor's eyes narrowed with interest. What concerns? Nothing that would delay the project, I hope. My investors are eager to proceed. Robert hesitated, looking torn between professional discretion and Eleanor's obvious authority as the project's primary financial backer. There are some questions about the endorsement process that require clarification. Eleanor turned to me, suddenly sharp. Do you know something about this, Camille? This was the first critical juncture, a moment where my response would set certain events in motion. I could downplay Robert's concerns, maintaining the status quo. I could confirm them, potentially derailing Colby's moment of triumph. Or I could take a third path. I believe in transparent processes for projects of this significance, I said carefully. The Westlake's restoration should be above reproach in every aspect, from historical accuracy to procedural integrity. Not a direct confirmation, but enough to validate Robert's concerns. Eleanor's expression shifted from irritation to calculation. She excused herself, moving purposefully toward the committee chair huddled near the podium. Within minutes, there was a subtle but noticeable shift in the room's energy. Committee members gathered in a tight circle, with occasional glances toward Colby and Meredith. Eleanor joined them, her posture conveying urgency. Colby, still by the display boards, seemed suddenly aware that something was amiss. Our eyes met, across the room. For a moment, recognition flickered in his gaze, not just of my presence, but of my potential role in whatever was unfolding. I maintained eye contact, neither accusatory nor triumphant, simply present and aware. The committee chair approached the podium, tapping the microphone to call for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be beginning our formal announcement shortly. There's been a slight change to our program. We ask for your patience. Meredith had noticed me by now, her eyes narrowing as she observed the unexpected commotion among the committee. With calculated precision, I moved to a position where I could observe both her and Colby while remaining part of a small conversational group with Robert and two preservation specialists. What's happening? One of the specialists whispered. Robert's response was diplomatically vague. Some last-minute verification of project documentation. Standard procedure for developments of this magnitude. Colby was now engaged in intense conversation with the committee chair, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. Meredith watched from a distance, her professional smile growing increasingly strained. My phone vibrated again with another text from Julian. Boston Foundation officially postponing announcement pending review of selection process. Internal. Memo cites verification of professional endorsements as reason. The chain reaction had begun, faster than I'd anticipated. What I had set in motion with subtle inquiries and carefully placed information was now developing its own momentum. The committee chair returned to the podium. Thank you for your patience. We will proceed with today's event as a project update, rather than a final announcement. Our commitment to the Westlake's restoration remains unwavering, but we believe additional diligence is required before proceeding with architect selection. A murmur ran through the crowd. Eleanor looked furious. Committee members appeared uncomfortable, and reporters began furiously taking notes about this unexpected development. Colby stood perfectly still amidst the commotion, his gaze fixed on me with dawning comprehension. I raised my champagne glass in the smallest of gestures, not a toast of celebration, but an acknowledgement that the game had changed. The first move had been made. The response would determine what came next. The fallout from the Westlake announcement, or, rather, non-announcement, was immediate and far-reaching. As guests dispersed in confused clusters, Reporters cornered committee members seeking explanations for the unexpected delay. I remained composed, engaging in light conversation with preservation colleagues while observing the ripple effects spreading through the room. Eleanor Blackwood had cornered Colby near the architectural displays, her elegant facade barely containing her obvious displeasure. Though I couldn't hear their exchange, her tense gestures and his defensive posture told their own story. Nearby, Meredith hovered uncertainly, caught between approaching them and maintaining professional distance. I excused myself from my conversation, grew and began a casual circuit toward the exit, timing my path to pass within earshot of Eleanor and Colby. Millions in potential delays because of procedural questions that should have been addressed weeks ago, Eleanor was saying, her voice low but intensity unmistakable. My investors expect certainty, not last-minute complications. The foundation endorsement was completely legitimate, Colby insisted. Meredith's letter simply highlighted our successful professional relationship. There's nothing improper about that. Except the Wilson Theater reference, Eleanor countered. The committee is questioning whether that collaboration actually occurred, as described. Robert Chen seems particularly concerned about verification. I continued past them without pausing, but Meredith caught my eye as I moved toward the door. The flash of comprehension in her gaze was unmistakable. She had connected my presence with the sudden scrutiny of her endorsement letter. Outside the hotel, I took a deep breath of spring air, savoring the moment of quiet triumph. I hadn't directly accused anyone of anything. I hadn't created a scene or demanded justice. I had simply ensured that the proper questions were asked by the right people at a critical moment. My phone rang as I reached my car. Christine. I just heard about the Westlake announcement being postponed, she said without preamble. Eleanor Blackwood's assistant called our office in a panic about potential contractual implications. What happened? I explained the situation as I drove away from the hotel, detailing how Robert Chen's concerns about the falsified endorsement had led to the committee's last-minute hesitation. And your role in all this? Christine asked, her tone suggesting she already knew. I simply confirmed what was already being investigated, I replied. The truth would have emerged eventually. I just accelerated the timeline. Christine's laugh held genuine admiration. Elegant. No direct accusations, no messy confrontations, just relevant facts surfacing at the perfect moment. She paused. How did Colby and Meredith react? Like people watching carefully constructed plans begin to unravel. But this is just the beginning. The real test will be how they respond in the coming days. Back at my studio, I checked my emails to find a message from the Westlake Committee requesting a meeting the following morning to review historical assessment documentation and discuss preservation consultation moving forward. A similar message had been sent to several other historical preservation experts. The committee was hedging their bets, exploring alternative architectural options while the endorsement issue was investigated. Colby's firm was no longer the presumptive selection. By evening, the ripple effects had become waves. The city's architecture blog posted a brief item about the delayed announcement, speculating about procedural concerns with the selection process. A business reporter had tweeted about questions surrounding foundation endorsements for the project. At 7 p.m., my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Through the peephole, I saw Sienna standing on my porch, looking uncomfortable but determined. I probably shouldn't be here, she said when I opened the door, but I thought you should know what's happening. I invited her in, curious about what had prompted Meredith's sister to reach out directly. Meredith is falling apart, Sienna said bluntly, declining my offer of tea or wine. After the Westlake disaster today, she got a call from Boston. The Heritage Foundation is formally investigating all endorsements for their project, including hers. They've asked her to provide documentation for every professional collaboration she cited in her recommendation letters. That sounds like standard due diligence, I observed, maintaining a neutral tone. Sienna's expression was skeptical. Maybe, but the timing is suspicious, especially coming right after the Westlake situation. She studied me carefully. Meredith thinks you're behind it. She's convinced you're orchestrating some elaborate revenge. I allowed myself a small smile. That gives me far more influence than I actually have. Foundation boards don't launch investigations based on personal vendettas. But they do act on credible concerns about procedural integrity, Sienna countered, especially when those concerns come from respected industry professionals with relevant knowledge. She wasn't wrong. My subtle inquiries through Julian and others had indeed raised legitimate questions that the foundations were now obligated to investigate. But I hadn't fabricated anything. I'd simply ensured that Meredith's actual misrepresentations received proper scrutiny. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked directly. Sienna sighed, suddenly looking tired. "Because this situation is heading toward mutual destruction. Meredith's career could be seriously damaged if the foundations determine she provided false endorsements. Colby's firm could lose both projects. And you," she hesitated. "And I what? You might win this battle but end up professionally tainted by association with the scandal," she finished. "No one emerges unscathed from this kind of industry drama." Her concern seemed genuine, if misplaced. "I appreciate your warning, Sienna. But I'm not driving this situation. Meredith's actions are. If she provided accurate endorsements, she has nothing to worry about." Sienna stood to leave, clearly unsatisfied with my response. At the door, she turned back. "They're planning to move to Boston next month, whether the Heritage Project comes through or not. Meredith's already accepted a position with their foundation. Colby's lined up potential clients there." She paused. "Just so you know what's at stake." After she left, I poured myself a glass of wine and considered this new information. Meredith and Colby were accelerating their Boston plans, despite the project uncertainty, perhaps hoping to outrun the consequences of their actions here. But the professional questions now following them wouldn't be so easily escaped. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a message. From Colby. "We need to talk. This has gone far enough." I didn't respond. Any communication would happen through proper channels, either legal representatives regarding our divorce or professional channels regarding ongoing projects. His attempt to establish direct contact suggested growing desperation, as his carefully planned future began to crumble. Wednesday brought a cascade of developments. The morning meeting with the Westlake Committee confirmed what I'd suspected. They were restructuring the entire selection process, requiring all architectural candidates to resubmit proposals without foundation endorsements. The project timeline was pushed back by at least 6 weeks. By afternoon, industry newsletters were reporting that the Boston Heritage Foundation had officially postponed their architect selection pending a review of their endorsement verification procedures. What had begun as quiet inquiries had evolved into a full procedural overhaul at both organizations. Vivian called while I was reviewing client designs at my studio. "Divorce papers are ready," she said. "Given recent developments, I recommend we file tomorrow." "Why the urgency?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Your husband's professional situation is becoming increasingly uncertain," she explained. "If his firm loses both the Westlake and Boston projects, their valuation could drop significantly. Filing now preserves your position regarding asset division based on current valuations." I agreed to sign the papers the following morning. The timing was perfect. Colby would be served just as the professional consequences of his and Meredith's actions were becoming unavoidably clear. That evening, as I worked late at my studio, Zoe appeared in my office doorway. "There's someone here to see you," she said, her expression concerned. "Curtis Warren. He seems pretty agitated." I considered refusing, then decided hearing Curtis's perspective might provide valuable insight into Colby's current state. "Send him in." Curtis entered looking haggard. his usually impeccable appearance showing signs of strain. "Camille, I know I'm the last person you want to see right now, but this situation is spiraling out of control." "Which situation specifically?" I asked, keeping my tone professional. "The Westlake selection delay? The Boston investigation? Or something else?" He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "All of it. Our firm is facing a crisis. The Westlake was supposed to be our cornerstone project for the next 2 years. Boston would have established our expansion to the East Coast. Now both are in jeopardy because of—" He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. "Because of what, Curtis?" I prompted. "Procedural issues with the endorsements," he finished carefully. "The committee is questioning Meredith Parker's letter specifically." I nodded, neither confirming nor denying knowledge of the details. "That sounds like a matter for your firm and Ms. Parker to address with the committee." Curtis looked at me directly then. "Colby thinks you're behind the timing of these investigations, that you somehow orchestrated this to punish him." "That's giving me far too much credit," I replied, echoing my response to Sienna. "Foundation boards and selection committees make their own decisions based on facts and procedures. But someone had to bring those facts to their attention at precisely this moment," Curtis persisted. "The Wilson Theater reference had been in the proposal materials for months without question." I met his gaze steadily. "Perhaps no one bothered to verify it until now. Due diligence often intensifies before final decisions are announced." Curtis didn't seem convinced, but he changed tactics. "Regardless of how this started, I'm here because our firm's survival may depend on finding a resolution. Colby is—" He hesitated, searching for words. "Not handling the situation well. The stress is affecting his judgment." "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not sure what you expect me to do about it." "Talk to him," Curtis pleaded. "Whatever personal issues exist between you, the professional fallout is affecting everyone at the firm. 20 people's livelihoods are at stake." His concern for his employees seemed genuine, which made his next request even more surprising. "Would you consider issuing a statement confirming your willingness to consult on the Westlake project regardless of which firm is selected? The committee values your historical assessment highly. Your continued involvement might help stabilize the situation while the endorsement questions are resolved." The request was both professional and manipulative, asking me to use my reputation to help salvage the situation Colby and Meredith had created. The old Camille might have agreed out of misplaced loyalty or a desire to smooth troubled waters, but I was no longer that woman. My professional commitments are determined by project merit and client relationships, not personal considerations, I replied evenly. The committee knows I'm available for consultation if the selected architect values historical accuracy. Beyond that, the selection process should proceed based on proper evaluation of all candidates. Curtis recognized the polite but firm rejection. He left with a defeated expression, undoubtedly aware he'd returned to Colby empty-handed. As I locked up the studio that night, I realized we had reached a turning point. What had begun as a personal betrayal had evolved into a professional reckoning, with far-reaching consequences. The carefully constructed future Colby and Meredith had planned was unraveling thread by thread, and the most significant thread, the divorce papers, would be pulled tomorrow. Thursday morning, I signed the divorce, papers in Vivian's office, my signature steady and deliberate on each page. The legal language reduced 8 years of marriage to clinical terms: division of assets, allocation of property rights, dissolution of shared financial obligations. What had once been a partnership built on love and trust was now a matter of contractual termination. "My associate will serve him today," Vivian explained as she gathered the documents. "Where would be most appropriate, his office or Ms. Parker's residence?" I considered this carefully. Having Colby served at his firm would create a public spectacle, potentially embarrassing him before colleagues already concerned about the Westlake and Boston situations. Being served at Meredith's home would make the divorce real in their shared domestic space, a tangible intrusion of consequences into their new life together. His office, I decided. Late afternoon, when he's likely to be there following committee meetings. Vivian nodded approvingly. Professional setting, minimal drama, maximum effectiveness. Well chosen. I spent the rest of the morning at my studio, focusing on client work with an intensity that surprised even me. There was something therapeutic about selecting historically accurate moldings for the Harriston project and finalizing color palettes for a Victorian restoration. Tangible creative tasks with clear parameters and satisfying results. At lunch, Christine called with updates from her firm's perspective. The Westlake investors are getting nervous. Eleanor Blackwood held an emergency meeting this morning to discuss contingency plans if the project timeline extends beyond original projections. Any mention of alternative architects? I asked. Several names are being floated. Most interesting. Development. They've specifically requested your continued involvement regardless of which firm is selected. Your historical assessment is apparently considered the gold standard for the project. This confirmed what Curtis had implied. My professional standing remained strong despite the personal and professional drama surrounding Colby and Meredith. Perhaps even enhanced by the contrast between my continued focus on project integrity and their questionable procedural maneuvers. I'll consider any legitimate offers, I replied. My concern has always been the building's historical significance, not who gets credit for the redesign. By mid-afternoon, my professional focus was interrupted by a flurry of texts from Emily. Major drama at Meredith's foundation. Emergency board meeting called. She's been in there for 2 hours. Followed shortly by, source says they're reviewing all her professional endorsements for the past 3 years. Boston Foundation sent formal inquiry about verification procedures. And finally, she just left the building, looked like she'd been crying, heading toward downtown, probably to Colby's office. I thanked Emily for the updates while marveling at how quickly information traveled through our social circles. The professional consequences were mounting faster than I'd anticipated. Meredith's foundation was clearly concerned about potential reputational damage from her actions. At 4:15 p.m., my phone lit up with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Is this Camille Thompson? A woman's professional voice. Yes, speaking. This is Diane Winters, chairperson for the Boston Heritage Foundation. I'm calling regarding some procedural questions about the Wilson Theater restoration. I understand you were the primary preservation consultant on that project. I confirmed this, maintaining a neutral tone as I explained my role in developing the historical guidelines and authenticating period details for the theater's restoration. And what was the Parker Foundation's involvement in that project? She asked directly. To my knowledge, they had no official involvement, I replied truthfully. Ms. Parker attended the opening gala as a guest, but her foundation wasn't part of the planning, funding, or implementation teams. There was a pause, then, I see, that's consistent with what our records indicate. Another pause. Ms. Thompson, would you be willing to provide a formal statement regarding the project's actual participants? We're conducting a thorough review of our selection process documentation. I agreed to send a factual account of the Wilson Theater project's key contributors, emphasizing that my statement would reflect only verifiable information rather than personal opinions or assumptions about why discrepancies might exist. After the call, I felt a momentary twinge of, not guilt exactly, but awareness of the escalating consequences. What had begun as questions about one endorsement letter was expanding into a comprehensive investigation of Meredith's professional practices. The Foundation Board's involvement suggested serious concerns about her credibility. At 5:30 p.m., I received a simple text from Vivian. Delivered. Colby had been served with divorce papers. The final piece was in place. I worked late at the studio, sensing that returning to an empty house would feel too much like waiting for a response that might never come. Around 8 p.m., Zoe knocked on my office door before leaving. "Everything okay?" she asked. "You've been here since dawn." "Just focused," I replied with a reassuring smile. "Go home, Zoe. I won't be much longer." But as the studio fell silent after her departure, I found myself unable to leave. The quiet space with its organized design boards and material samples provided a sanctuary of creative purpose amidst the emotional and professional turbulence of recent days. At 9:17 p.m., my phone rang. Colby. I stared at his name on the screen, my finger hovering over the decline button. After a moment's hesitation, I answered but said nothing. "Divorce papers?" His voice was rough, strained. "That's your response to everything? You couldn't even talk to me first?" "There's nothing to discuss," I replied evenly. "Our marriage ended when you chose to leave with my best friend on my birthday." "This isn't just about us anymore," he said, frustration evident. "My entire firm is in jeopardy. The Westlake Committee is reconsidering our selection. Boston has delayed their decision. Clients are getting nervous about our stability." "Those sound like professional concerns you should discuss with your business partner and legal counsel," I said, maintaining my detached tone. "I'm no longer in a position to help manage your firm's reputation." "Damn it, Camille." His sudden anger crackled through the phone. "Stop pretending you're not behind this. The timing is too perfect. The Boston Foundation called Meredith for verification literally, hours after the Westlake announcement was delayed. You did this." "I did nothing except ensure that legitimate questions were asked by the appropriate authorities," I corrected him. "If those questions are causing problems, perhaps you should examine why." His breathing was audible, heavy with barely contained emotion. "Meredith is devastated. The Foundation Board is questioning all her professional recommendations. Her reputation is based on her actual actions and choices," I finished for him. "Just like yours." There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice suddenly quieter. "She's talking about withdrawing her Boston Foundation application, staying here instead of moving. She thinks that might fix things somehow." The unspoken implication hung between us. If they didn't move to Boston, if they faced the consequences of their actions here, perhaps some form of reconciliation might be possible. "Nothing can be fixed, Colby," I said firmly. "Not our marriage, not your relationship with Meredith, not the professional situation you've both created. Actions have consequences." "We made a mistake," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "The way we handled everything, it was wrong. I know that now." "Realizing that doesn't change anything," I replied, surprised by how little satisfaction his admission gave me. "The divorce papers have been filed. My attorney will handle all further communication." "Camille, please." "Goodbye, Colby." I ended the call and sat in the silence of my studio, feeling oddly hollow. His partial admission, acknowledging the mistake in how they'd handled things rather than the betrayal itself, confirmed what I'd suspected. Under pressure, Colby was questioning the high price of his choices without truly grasping the depth of his actions. As I finally gathered my things to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Spotted C&M at Riverfront Park. Major fight." She stormed off alone. "He's still there looking wrecked." Something big happened. I didn't respond. Whatever drama was unfolding between them was their story now, not mine. I had taken control of my own narrative and set certain consequences in motion, but their relationship would succeed or fail based on its own fragile foundation, and judging by Emily's report, that foundation was already beginning to crack under pressure. Friday morning brought a sense of inevitability, like watching the final pieces of a complex puzzle slide into place. I arrived at my studio early, determined to focus on client work rather than dwelling on the personal and professional drama still unfolding around Colby and Meredith. Zoe greeted me with coffee and a stack of industry newsletters. "Thought you might want to see these," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "There's quite a bit about the Westlake project and Thompson and Warren." The headlines told their own story. Westlake Hotel renovation process under review amid endorsement concerns. Boston Heritage Foundation postpones architect selection indefinitely. Parker Foundation examining internal protocols following procedural questions. What had begun as subtle inquiries had evolved into a full-blown professional examination of both Colby and Meredith's practices. The articles maintained journalistic objectivity, citing procedural concerns and verification processes rather than making direct accusations. But the implications were clear to anyone in our industry. Questions about professional integrity had been raised, and those questions were being taken seriously. Mid-morning, Robert Chen called to update me on the Westlake situation. "The committee has decided to completely restructure the selection process," he explained. "All firms are being invited to resubmit proposals without foundation endorsements. Technical merit and preservation approach will be the primary criteria." "Fair approach," I commented. "When will the new selection be announced?" "Approximately 6 weeks. And Camille," he added, his tone shifting slightly, "the committee would like you to serve as a special advisor on historical accuracy throughout the selection process. Your assessment work has been exemplary, and they value your objective perspective." The irony wasn't lost on me. My professional standing had been enhanced by the very situation that had upended my personal life. I accepted the advisory role, emphasizing that my evaluation would be based solely on preservation merits rather than personal or professional allegiances. Around noon, Christine texted, "Curtis Warren just announced he's buying out Colby's share of the firm. Emergency restructuring to distance the practice from recent controversies. Firm will be renamed Warren & Associates next month." This was significant news. Curtis had evidently decided that preserving the firm's reputation required separating from Colby entirely. A drastic step that suggested the damage to Colby's professional standing went beyond just the Westlake and Boston projects. Was still processing this information when Emily called, her voice pitched with excitement. "You won't believe what just happened at the Parker Foundation. Meredith has been asked to take a temporary leave of absence while they conduct their internal review. I have a friend who works in their development office. She said the board voted unanimously after receiving inquiries from 3 different organizations about Meredith's endorsement practices. The dominoes were falling faster than I'd anticipated. Meredith's carefully constructed professional identity, the respected foundation executive, the arts patron, the community leader, was crumbling under scrutiny. Her impulsive decision to falsify a professional endorsement to benefit Colby was now threatening everything she'd built. "There's more," Emily continued breathlessly. "Meredith showed up at Sienna's apartment last night in tears. According to Sienna, the Boston Foundation position is definitely off the table. They contacted her yesterday afternoon to go in another direction with their leadership transition." I thanked Emily for the update and returned to my design work, maintaining my outward focus on client projects despite the cascade of developments. Whatever was happening with Colby and Meredith now, my primary concern needed to be rebuilding my own life and future. Late that afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Eleanor Blackwood, requesting a private meeting to discuss potential opportunities related to the Westlake renovation. I agreed to meet her the following morning at her downtown office. As I prepared to leave the studio that evening, Zoe appeared in my doorway with an unusual expression, somewhere between concern and curiosity. "Colby Thompson is here," she said, quietly. "He's been waiting in the reception area for almost an hour. I told him you were in meetings, but he insisted on waiting." I considered having Zoe ask him to leave, citing Vivian's directive about communication through attorneys. But something, perhaps curiosity, perhaps a desire for formal closure, made me decide to see him. "Send him in," I said, squaring my shoulders, and adopting the composed professional demeanor that had become my armor. Colby entered my office looking like a different man from the confident architect who'd walked out on my birthday just 1 week earlier. His usual impeccable appearance had deteriorated noticeably. Hair unkempt, eyes shadowed by fatigue, expensive, suit rumpled as if he'd slept in it. But more striking than these physical changes was his expression, a mixture of defeat, desperation, and something that might have been genuine remorse. "Thank you for seeing me," he began, remaining standing when I didn't invite him to sit. "I know I have no right to be here." "What do you want, Colby?" I asked, my tone businesslike. "If it's about the divorce, you should contact Vivian Morales. Any communication needs to go through our attorneys." "It's not about the legal papers," he said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Or rather, not just about that. It's about everything." I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "Curtis is buying me out," he said, his voice hollow. "The firm I built from nothing. He says it's the only way to salvage our client relationships after the Westlake and Boston disasters. Says my personal choices have become a liability to the business." I noted his phrasing. The firm I built, not the firm we built together. Even now, facing the consequences of his actions, Colby's perspective remained fundamentally self-centered. "That sounds like a business decision between you and Curtis," I replied evenly. "I'm not sure why you're telling me this." "Because everything is falling apart." The words burst from him with unexpected force. "The Boston position is gone. The Westlake project is in limbo. Meredith's foundation has put her on leave. Our entire future has disintegrated in less than a week." I met his gaze steadily. "Actions have consequences, Colby. You and Meredith made choices that are now being examined in the cold light of professional scrutiny." "This isn't just professional scrutiny," he countered, a flash of his old confidence returning. "This is systematic destruction. The timing is too perfect, the targeting too precise." He stepped closer to my desk. "You're behind this. Somehow you made all this happen." I did nothing except ensure that legitimate questions were asked by the appropriate authorities. I repeated my earlier statement, keeping my voice calm. The fact that those questions have led to significant consequences suggests the answers weren't what they should have been. He slumped visibly, the brief spark of defiance extinguished. "Meredith blames me," he said quietly. "Says I pushed her to write that endorsement letter. Says I'm the reason her career is imploding." "And what do you say?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. "I say we both made mistakes," he admitted, looking down at his hands. "But I never expected this. The complete collapse of everything." There was a moment of silence as we both absorbed the magnitude of what had transpired in just 7 days, from my birthday betrayal to this comprehensive unraveling of their professional and personal lives. "What do you want from me, Colby?" I finally asked. He looked up, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "A chance to come home, to fix what I broke." The request was so unexpected, so utterly disconnected from reality, that for a moment, I could only stare at him in disbelief. "You want to come back? After everything that's happened?" He nodded, a desperate hope in his eyes. "Meredith and I, it's over. We both realize we made a terrible mistake. I never should have left. I see that now." I studied him carefully, seeing beyond his words to the truth beneath. Colby wasn't experiencing a genuine epiphany about our marriage or his betrayal. He was seeking shelter from the storm of consequences, a return to safety and stability now. That his grand passion with Meredith had collapsed under pressure. "No," I said simply, the word carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "There's no coming back from what you did. Not to our home, not to our marriage, not to the life we had. Camille, please, our divorce will proceed as filed," I continued, my voice steady and final. You made your choice on my birthday. Now you'll live with the consequences of that choice, just as I'm living with mine. The last traces of hope faded from his expression, replaced by the dawning realization that some doors, once closed, remain permanently sealed. He turned to leave, then paused at the threshold. For what it's worth, he said without looking back, walking out that door was the biggest mistake of my life. As the studio fell silent after his departure, I remained at my desk, surprisingly, unmoved by his declaration or his request to return. Whatever emotional turmoil I might have felt at such a scene even a few days earlier had been replaced by a clear-eyed understanding of my own worth and the future I was building. Colby had come back not because he truly valued what we'd had, but because the alternative had proven too costly. His regret was for consequences, not actions, for what he'd lost, not for the pain he'd caused. And in that moment, I realized that the resolution I'd sought wasn't about revenge or justice or even closure. It was about reclaiming my own narrative and moving forward on my own terms, regardless of what happened with Colby and Meredith. The complete story had written itself, without my needing to dictate the ending. All I'd done was ensure that truth emerged at the right moment, through the right channels, with the right witnesses. The rest was simply the natural consequence of choices freely made. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect spring day that seemed incongruous with the storm of events that had consumed the past week. I arrived at Eleanor Blackwood's downtown office building precisely at 9, curious about the potential opportunities she'd mentioned in her email. Eleanor's office occupied the entire top floor of a sleek glass tower, offering panoramic views of the city skyline and river beyond. Her assistant led me to a private conference room where Eleanor waited, impeccably dressed as always, reviewing documents spread across the polished table. "Camille, thank you for coming," she greeted me, gesturing toward a chair. "I imagine you've had quite an eventful week." "No more than you, considering the Westlake situation," I replied diplomatically. She smiled, appreciating my professional discretion. "Indeed, which brings me to why I asked you here." She pushed a folder toward me. "My investment group is considering a restructured approach to the Westlake renovation. We'd like to secure your services as the primary historical preservation consultant, working directly with us rather than through whichever architectural firm is eventually selected." I opened the folder to find a detailed contract offering significantly more autonomy and compensation than my original consulting role. The proposal would elevate my position from advisor to key decision-maker on all historical elements of the renovation. "This is generous," I acknowledged, scanning the terms. "But why the change in structure?" Eleanor's expression was calculating. "Recent events have demonstrated the importance of integrity in this project. Your historical assessment has been consistently thorough and accurate, untainted by the complications that have emerged elsewhere." She leaned forward slightly. "In blunt terms, Camille, you've maintained professional excellence despite personal upheaval that would have derailed most people. My investors value that kind of stability and ethical foundation." The irony wasn't lost on me. Eleanor had previously dismissed my situation with Colby and Meredith as a relationship that had run its course. Now she was explicitly acknowledging the contrast between my professional conduct and theirs. "I'll need time to review the contract details," I said, closing the folder. "But I'm certainly interested in the expanded role." We discussed project specifics for another half hour before concluding our meeting. As her assistant escorted me toward the elevator, Eleanor called after me. "One more thing, Camille. There's a foundation charity gala next weekend, the annual Arts and Preservation Benefit. As a key project consultant, your presence would be appreciated." Her smile held a hint of mischief. "I believe it's being held at the Cartwright Hotel this year, rather than the usual venue at the Parker Foundation headquarters. Interesting timing for a change, wouldn't you say?" The subtext was clear. Meredith's influence at her foundation had diminished so significantly that even the annual gala had been relocated. The professional consequences of her actions were continuing to ripple outward. As I left the building, my phone chimed with a text from Christine. "Lunch at Riverview? Have interesting updates." An hour later, I joined Christine at our favorite riverside cafe, where she was already sipping white wine at an outdoor table overlooking the water. "You seem particularly pleased with yourself," I observed as I sat across from her. "I have reason to be," she replied with a satisfied smile. "I've just come from a meeting with Vivian." Colby's attorney finally responded to the divorce filing. "They're not contesting anything. Full agreement to terms, expedited process, minimal negotiation." She raised her glass in a small toast. "Apparently your husband is eager to resolve matters as quickly and quietly as possible." This was unexpected but welcome news. I'd prepared for a potentially contentious divorce process, especially given Colby's desperate visit to my studio. "That's surprisingly reasonable of him," I said cautiously. Christine's smile widened. "It might have something to do with Curtis Warren's buyout terms. Word is, Curtis made the smooth resolution of your divorce a condition of the partnership dissolution. No messy personal entanglements bleeding into the firm's reputation." She took a sip of wine before continuing. "But that's not even the most interesting development. Meredith has officially resigned from the Parker Foundation, not just the temporary leave of absence, but complete separation. The press release cites personal reasons and new opportunities, but everyone in the nonprofit circle knows the real story. Her professional credibility is essentially gone." As we ordered lunch, Christine shared additional details gleaned from her extensive professional network. The Boston Heritage Foundation had formally rescinded Colby's firm's candidacy for their project. The Westlake Committee was now considering 5 new architectural proposals, and Meredith had been quietly removed from several prestigious board positions she'd previously held. The comprehensive unraveling of their professional lives had happened with astonishing speed, just 7 days from my birthday betrayal to this complete reversal of fortune. "You never directly accused either of them of anything," Christine noted admiringly. "You simply ensured that the right questions were asked by the right people at the right time. The system did the rest." "Their choices did the rest," I corrected her. "I just made sure those choices received appropriate scrutiny." After lunch, I spent the afternoon at a home decor boutique selecting new bedding and curtains for the master bedroom, small changes to reclaim spaces that had been shared with Colby. The simple act of choosing patterns and textures based solely on my own preferences felt surprisingly liberating. I was loading my purchases into my car when I heard someone call my name. Turning, I found myself face to face with Meredith. Unlike Colby's disheveled appearance yesterday, Meredith had maintained her polished exterior, designer sunglasses, perfectly styled hair, immaculate clothing. But beneath the careful facade, subtle signs of strain were visible: tightness around her mouth, a slight tremor in her hands, shadows under eyes concealed by expertly applied concealer. "We need to talk," she said without preamble, her voice carrying that familiar, authoritative tone she'd used in foundation board meetings. "I disagree," I replied calmly, continuing to arrange shopping bags in my trunk. "We have nothing to discuss." "You've systematically destroyed my career," she persisted, stepping closer. "The foundation position, the board appointments, my professional reputation, all gone in less than a week. At least have the decency to admit what you've done." I closed my trunk and turned to face her directly. "What I've done? I didn't falsify a professional endorsement. I didn't misrepresent my involvement in the Wilson Theater project. I didn't leverage a foundation position for personal benefit. Those were your choices, Meredith." Her composure slipped slightly, eyes flashing behind her designer sunglasses. "You knew exactly what would happen when you started raising questions about verification procedures. This was calculated revenge." "No," I corrected her. "This was natural consequence. There's a difference." Colby thinks we should never have left the way we did, she said, abruptly changing tactics. That we should have handled things more honestly, more respectfully. How considerate of him to develop ethical concerns after the fact, I remarked dryly. Though I notice you're saying, we should never have left, rather than, we shouldn't have betrayed you. The distinction is telling. She removed her sunglasses, her expression shifting to one I'd seen her use countless times when soliciting major donations. Earnest, vulnerable, carefully calibrated to elicit sympathy. Camille, we've been friends for 15 years. Surely, that counts for something. People make mistakes. Relationships get complicated. Sleeping with my husband behind my back for 6 months wasn't a mistake, Meredith. It was a deliberate series of choices. Planning to announce your relationship at my birthday dinner wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was calculated cruelty. I never wanted to hurt you, she insisted, her eyes now glistening with what might have been genuine tears, or simply an expert performance. Things between you and Colby had been strained for months. You told me yourself how disconnected you felt, how you worried your fertility issues were driving him away. The reference to my most private confessions, vulnerabilities I'd shared during what I thought were supportive friend conversations, ignited a cold anger I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. And instead of supporting me as a friend, you used that information to position yourself as his consolation. You didn't just betray me as a wife, Meredith. You weaponized my trust as a friend. My voice remained steady despite the emotion behind my words. That's why there's no coming back from this. Not for my marriage, and not for our friendship. So that's it? She asked, a hint of genuine desperation finally breaking through her polished veneer. 15 years of friendship? Erased? My entire career destroyed? All because of one mistake? Your career isn't being destroyed because of your affair with Colby, I clarified. It's being impacted because you falsified professional endorsements and misrepresented your involvement in projects. Those were professional choices with professional consequences. I stepped away from my car, preparing to leave, but turned back. With one final thought. And Meredith? It wasn't just one mistake. It was hundreds of individual choices, made day after day for months, each one a deliberate decision to betray someone who trusted you completely. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, her careful composure finally crumbling entirely. For the first time since I'd known her, Meredith looked genuinely stripped of her practiced charm and strategic calculation. Just a woman facing the full weight of her choices, without the buffer of self-deception. He's left me, she said suddenly, her voice small. Colby moved out yesterday, said we were toxic together, that we brought out the worst in each other. A bitter laugh escaped her. He actually said he never should have left you, that you were the better woman after all. I absorbed this information without visible reaction, though it confirmed what Colby had implied during his desperate visit to my studio. That sounds like something between you and Colby. It doesn't concern me anymore. As I walked away, Meredith called after me, a note of bewildered frustration in her voice. How are you so calm, so controlled? Aren't you angry? Don't you want to scream at me to hurt me the way I hurt you? I paused, considering her question seriously. I was angry. Devastated, actually. But I realized something important this week, Meredith. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And that's what I feel for both of you now. Genuine indifference. The truth of those words settled over me with surprising lightness as I drove away, leaving Meredith standing alone in the parking lot. Whatever power she and Colby had once held over my emotions, whether through love, friendship, betrayal, or pain, had dissolved completely. They had become characters in a story I was ready to close, their significance fading with each day I moved forward, building my own new chapter. The final confrontation hadn't provided the emotional catharsis that dramatic narratives might suggest. Instead, it had confirmed something more valuable: my complete emotional and psychological independence from people who had once been central to my life. And that, I realized, was the most profound victory of all. 1 month after my birthday, I stood in my newly redesigned bedroom, surveying the changes I'd made. The king-sized bed that Colby and I had shared had been replaced with an elegant queen, positioned differently to capture morning light. New artwork adorned walls once decorated. With our wedding photos, the color palette had shifted from our compromise of muted blues to the rich jewel tones I'd always preferred. The space now reflected only my tastes, my preferences, my vision, a physical manifestation of the internal transformation I'd undergone. The divorce had been finalized with unexpected speed, aided by Colby's complete acquiescence to my terms. Professionally, my design business was thriving, with the expanded Westlake role bringing additional prestige and a flood of new client inquiries. I'd hired 2 additional designers to handle the increased workload, moving my studio to a larger space in the Arts District. Most significant was the shift in how I defined myself. No longer was I Camille Thompson, Colby's wife and Meredith's friend. I was simply Camille, autonomous and self-determined, defined by my own choices rather than my relationships to others. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. Christine and Emily had arrived for our planned dinner, a small celebration of my new home configuration and expanded business. "The place looks amazing," Emily exclaimed, taking in the changes as I guided them through the house. "It feels completely different." "That's the point," I replied with a smile. "New chapter, new environment." Over dinner, Christine raised her glass in a toast. To Camille, who showed us all how to respond to betrayal with grace, strategy, and absolute badassery. I laughed, touched by her characterization. "I wouldn't call it badassery, just self-preservation with a dash of justice." "Have you heard the latest?" Emily asked, never one to resist sharing updates. "Colby's taken a teaching position at the community college. Apparently, private firms weren't eager to hire an architect with his recent complications. And Meredith's moved back in with her parents while she reassesses her career path." I absorbed this information with genuine neutrality, neither satisfaction nor sympathy. Their current circumstances were simply the natural conclusion to the story they had chosen to write. "Enough about them," I said, refilling our glasses. "Tell me about the manuscript you're working on, Emily. And Christine, how's the Thompson case going?" As we shifted to discussing their lives and projects, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The betrayal that had seemed world-ending just a month ago had transformed into something unexpected. A catalyst for growth, an opportunity for reinvention. The woman who had stood shocked in her doorway watching her husband leave with her best friend no longer existed. In her place was someone stronger, clearer, more authentically herself. Someone who understood that endings, even painful ones, often create space for new beginnings. As my friends laughed and shared stories around my dining table, I realized that what had initially felt like devastating loss had actually been a profound liberation. Sometimes the best gift comes wrapped in the most painful package. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.